This meeting of the Nacogdoches Conviction and Visitors Bureau. First order of business is approve the minutes from the July 18th meeting. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Second. Motion second. All in favor of approving the minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Okay. Next. We have the audit result. Before we get that, Mr. Hancock would like to address the board this morning quickly. Mr. Hancock?
Thank you. This, I think, is my first opportunity to attend a board meeting since the decision was made to move forward with the new campaign. And I just want to say thank you for the trust you placed in us. And we are working with Sherry and staff to excitedly and working toward rolling out the new campaign in the new year. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. All right. Next, we have results of our audit. Mr. Johnson, Gary Johnson.
All right. Standing right in front of the camera here, is that all right?
Look at your backside.
Good side. Yeah, we're gonna pass these out. So that's one of the things, that's two of the things. That's three. So I need to have one of those I can read off of. Yeah, my name is Gary Johnson. Yeah. And with the firm Halls Johnson McLemore in Redfield.
Did you need a stamp, you said?
Yeah, that way I get a question, I'll be able to read what I got here. And as we're coming around, this will be the results of the September 17 fiscal year audit. And this year, as opposed to the 2016, it's what we call clean opinion. And that a clean opinion for an auditor doesn't mean it's necessarily good or bad, as soon as we think the numbers are correct in the material thing. So if you say, I have $100 in the bank, and I audit that and say, sure enough, I agree, there's $100 in the bank. Well, that might be good, it might be bad, but it's accurate. So, but that being said, I do a few other little things here. If you remember in 2016's report, we had a qualified opinion, and in audit terminology, qualified is not good. You think, oh, that's not qualified. Well, we're just the opposite. We say everything is great except for, and that would be the qualification. So if you remember 2016, we were unable to vouch the disbursements that were made from what they call a music event. Around $40,000 of expenses and stuff, so there was just no paperwork for it, so we couldn't bring our opinion on that little piece of the cash transactions. Of course, that didn't reoccur in 2017, so we're good to go for 17. Has everybody got the papers and stuff? So the audit is handsomely bound in here. And on page 3 is a comparative balance sheet. And I like to have a comparative thing. You kind of see where you work from year to year. And there's really nothing of any consequence on the balance sheet that sticks out. But I do want to remind y'all of the equity, or they call net assets, that's divided into two pieces. One's temporarily restricted, which is your hot tax money. Because it's restricted, you have to spend it in a certain fashion in accordance with Code Section 351. And so that makes it restricted. And as you spend the money out of that hot tax money in accordance with the restriction, then that has an effect on that. So the balance at the September 30, 17 was that you still had about $300,000 that you're holding either in CDs or in the bank account as unspent hot tax money as of at that time. And then in this case, everything else is unrestricted, which is about 232, most of which is your fixed assets. And the biggest part of your fixed assets are those wayfinding signs that are around the neighborhood, around town. And I'm going to skip page 4 for now, back to that, but I'm going to go straight to page 5. Well, if you have any questions, y'all just holler them out. Okay? these are the expenses, and it's a functional look at things, and so we have all the generic or natural classifications, such as salaries, and I'll point out a few little ups and downs that you've had between 16 fiscal year and 17 fiscal year. But you see, your program is primarily just one program. Some nonprofits have maybe 4 or 5 programs. In this case, there's just one. Management, general, and then total. And you kind of eyeball down the columns here and kind of do a comparative. And there's a few things that did stick out that I thought I mentioned just to remind you. One is that your interim director was actually not a salary, it was a contract. So I put that out on a separate line. Anything else that kind of Christmas lights, y'all spent that in fiscal 16, did not repeat that in fiscal 17. It was around $11,000. And those few of the things. I think those are the biggest ones. Oh, well, and your website way at the bottom. And that's in accordance with that simple view contract. So there's really, I don't think there's really hardly any payments to be made in fiscal 18. It's a 3-year contract, so most of that money was spent in the first couple of years of that contract. But that's just really what you spent on those things. Anybody questions on any fluctuations or anything like that? But if not, then I'll make you go backwards to page 4. So all those totals for all those columns, like total management, total program, 681. If you look at the page before, which is 2017, you'll see that expenses are just that one line item. Visitor Center and Tourism Promotion, 681, 675. Because all the details are on page 5. The top half of that report on page 4 is the income items. And the major source of fluctuation there is in fiscal 16. Y'all received $48,000 from the city to help pay for that website updo. That was just the simple view stuff. So, but everything else I think is fairly consistent. You might question anything so far. And if y'all need to spend more, I'm trying to be quick because I know you have kind of a long day. Okay. And then there's 2 other reports. One of them is kind of meaningless. But the other one is meaningful, and it's the report on internal control. And it actually, if you look in the middle, I have like 2016-1. I've itemized the areas of findings that we had. And I tried to go back and pick up the 2016 items and update them. And there's only one that I needed to repeat, and this has now gone away as of today. But the first one last year was about we talked about the music festival not having adequate records. Well, that's a moot point now. We pull and we test, I think, a lot of stuff in this case. Y'all had history of problems, so I'm heavy on trying to vouch as much as I can. But we have any problems really whatsoever as far as vouching stuff. The filing system is in really good shape now. Last year it was a little bit scattered. Thanks to Cheryl and Mike, they really do both of them. The one I want to repeat this on page 2 is about bank reconciliation. And so those are now being reviewed, but as of September 30th, they hadn't. That process hadn't started yet. And the reason I think that's important is because Cheryl does the bookkeeping. And the one thing to do is to watch, if she wanted to steal money, not that she would, but if she went crazy and decided I'm going to steal money and move to Brazil, well, she could hide that on the books or never post it to the books, but it would show up in the bank statement. And so where you find that is when a person reconciles the books to the bank statement, that's where you find, boo-boos and stuff, irregularities, what we call them. That's a nice word. But anyway, so since she has so much control over the bookkeeping, then we think it's real critical that somebody independent of Cheryl review the bank records, make sure the bank statements tie out to the books. And she does it real good in the system, but just somebody independent of her needs to look at that. So repeated that, right now somebody's doing that now, so. But as of September 30th, they haven't done it. The rest of these have been fixed. Like 2016-3 was maintain separate profiles for restricted and unrestricted. You know, we talk about the hot tax money being restricted. And so, try to maintain purity of that. We don't want to run afoul of spending hot tax money for ineligible stuff. That would be bad. So I have two ways of doing it. I'm not sure what other entities would do, but right now y'all are basically trying to maintain hot tax money and the eligible spending in a separate bank account, but it's also maintained in QuickBooks under a certain class, for, what you call it, restricted, or restricted. And so you could pull up on QuickBooks and, well, here's money we spent out of the hot tax money, and whether it's on salaries or office supplies, whatever the category is. And then, but it's also maintained in a separate bank account. So that's 1,000% better than it was in the past. So I think we're good with the results of that. There was y'all had deposited $8,000 of Western Trailer.
Yes.
Something.
Or I think it was the membership dues from the.
Yeah, something. And so she transferred that over from the restricted to the unrestricted, because she had basically deposited unrestricted source income into the hot tax account. But the books were tracking correctly. It's just that the separate bank account didn't work. And then 1099 forms, those are done. And the filing system, that's way better. And so really, it's good news, because everything's way better than it has been. And it's, I always like to do those kind of reports, it's so much easier. And I really didn't want to do the audit for 17. I'm trying to phase audits out of my life, but I'm thinking, okay, if I got like a 5-year retirement plan, I can start doing less work. And that's my goal. And so anyway, be that as it may, so I think that the people that do the city audit might be doing the audit next year. Any questions or anything?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for doing our audit for us.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little late, but I appreciate it very much. And your opinion, these were noted because they were during the time that you were audited. This is the condition that it was in.
Right.
But your opinion is that almost all of this has been greatly.
Oh, absolutely.
taken
Yeah.
care of.
The only qualification was the reconciliations. Honestly, I didn't realize that was something that needed to be done until he told us about this during the last audit, which was in July or August, right?
Yeah,
When we were doing that. And I was ready to start doing that, and that's about the time Tony was fading out, and we didn't have anybody here in that position for about 3 or 4 weeks. I was having to get you to sign checks and everything, and as soon as Sherry got here, she started signing. So that has been implemented. It was just an awkward time.
Yeah. It's a lot of transition, so hopefully that's behind y'all. And so normally, like if it's September 30th, and I'm trying to get anything to do with September 30th, I need that done by Christmas. So it's just, that's why it spills on over to here in August. And last year we didn't finish until then because there were some books, part of 16 that you went back to.
We just found boxes.
Yeah, so that
was interesting.
Yeah, and that's why my bill's higher than it was last year. Last year I just did it for like half the price. And so since I didn't want to do audits, and Jim Jeffers begged me. We won't go into that. But anyway.
Chair on.
Who's doing the bank reconciliations now?
I do them, but Sherry
I
reviews
sign
them
on
and
them.
signs them.
Yeah, make sure
Second
that's
key
done.
class.
Oh, and also the 990's been filed with the IRS, it's done. You remember y'all, the thing was late for a few years, and I paid about 13,000 penalties for that being late. That's done. Now, the employees are now run through the city, so what I'm fixing to say is a moot point, but I do check, and all the payroll tax deposits were done. There was a couple of them that were late, which was like a 12-cent penalty, which is a moot point with the IRS, but other than that, a couple of them being a few days late, there, it was really done. Snap good, so.
Awesome, thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
oh yeah, yeah. So you got you a good thing if I don't lose it.
Okay, thank you. We'll be sure not to. Thank you. Does anyone else, any more questions for Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, thank you very much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate your help in this.
All right, I'm gonna slip out there.
All right, all right, yes, sir. Thank
You
you.
don't want to this one.
Right. Announcements?
On the September 4th, before that city council meeting, David Teal, who's the president of the Texas Tourism Industry Association,
Everyone's up here.
will be coming in town to present me with my certified tourism executive designation. So I invite y'all to come for that.
Congratulations.
Cool, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
City council.
It'll be at the very beginning of, so it's 5:30?
30.
Oh, the council
Yeah,
meeting.
the
Okay.
council meeting.
Awesome, that's fantastic. It was always good to see Mr. Teal in town.
Yeah, and that very next day, we will have, September 5th and 6th is, the TACVB is having a destination marketing principal symposium in town, so we'll have more industry professionals in town. They have opened that up if there is anybody that you know of, and we'll be sure to push it out on our social media. Anybody that wants to attend that conference, I believe registration is $100, but they'll be able to use our membership to receive a discounted rate, but it will take place at the Fredonia Hotel. And they're going to do secret shoppers. I can't remember the other one. Anyway, it's a good thing. It's a good
Yeah,
deal.
it's a great showcase for our city. Definitely have those professionals in town with us. Good week for us. All right, let's get right into the budget workshop. And we do have a lot of things to cover, the budget and the marketing plan. I encourage one to certainly ask questions, purposes for us to certainly understand what we're approving. And there are some items in here that are some expenses that we're going to have to really look at and figure out how we're going to pay for them, because there's some necessities on here. But we do have a lot to cover, and so we're going to try to stay on point as much as possible and focus on the meat of the budget and such. So with that, Ms. Bartlett.
I guess let's look at July first, the July statement, just the normal monthly.
Okay.
Just get that
While
out
y'all
of the
do
way.
that, I've forgotten a piece that I need, but
Do you have the sympathy card?
I'll grab that while I'm up there.
That was the other thing that I didn't have.
The July statement is at the back of our packet, I believe. It's the last page of the packet.
I don't think there's anything terribly unusual in the July statement. If you look at the percentage of budget on the right side, some of those look kind of wild and crazy, that like 318% on restroom trailer expense, that's because we had to do that generator, but I will go ahead and say for the next fiscal year, we are proposing to move both the restroom trailer income and the restroom trailer expense to the balance sheet, basically making it a fund that collects and then we pay out of, so it's not gonna show up on here at all next year on the, it should not be, it should have really never been. I can question that, but
Okay.
at the time, but, let's see, I don't know what else. Brick engraving expenses up because we sold more bricks. Mike sold 9 to one person. last month, so that kind of jumps it up. But that's an income for us. The engraving does not cost as much as, you know, we sell the bricks for, so. Telephone, of course, is way over because we had the blow up last fall. I don't even know what happened. The system burned up or something. We should be getting more hot tax money, I think, any day now. How does that usually time out? We haven't gotten the second quarter.
Right.
And that ended in June, so.
Last statement I looked at, there was a deficient hotel on there for several months. Is that still the case? Do you know?
We got a check for the Quality Inn that was deficient for it was the fourth quarter and the first quarter. Actually, third and fourth and first quarters. But that was not very much. What I'm talking about is the June for everybody should be coming.
Right,
That usually comes in August sometime, so
yes.
we should get the second
Yeah,
quarter.
we should be getting that.
So, I mean, right now, our income, the hot fund, we're at 77%, so that would be one more quarter missing, would be about right, so. And hopefully that'll bring us up to the budget and we should be okay. Can't really think of anything else. Have any questions on this, you know, just a 1 month glimpse with year to date, so.
Right, some of these expenses, especially like telephone, I think is one that we're going to address through the budget process.
Well, this is 10 months, we only got 2 left in this fiscal year, so I think, you know, pretty much we're doing okay. We haven't pulled, you know, we had pulled from reserves in our budget and we haven't had to do that yet. Hopefully, if we can, you know, keep going and not have to do that, then we'll hold it off. Any questions?
Any questions on this month's statement or year-to-date statement? All right, let's roll into the budget.
I prepared 3 different worksheets. They're just labeled 1, 2, and 3 for, you know, real creative. Just a different view of things, and I don't know if this will help you or not. This is just kind of what I think, how I think about some of these things. The first one is pretty straightforward, the previous year's budget, like the current year we're in now. The actual expenses through July, so that's 10 months worth. To project, you know, you basically divide by 10, multiply by 12 to say, if what we've done for the last 10 months continues, this is what we would be at. Unless I knew of something specific that's coming up that would change that. I put it in the proposed budget. Plus, there are some things that Sherry and Joanna and Stephanie and I met and talked through some things that they want to do differently to kind of plan better. So I guess we can kind of, trying to think what's different about. Worksheet 2 might be a little bit easier to look at. I added another column, estimated actual for 12 months. That actually has a column in there for divide by 10, multiply by 12, unless there's something specific. So that one might be a little easier to look at if you want to know where we could be, should be, kind of whatever. Income is pretty self-explanatory. The city suggested we use the same budget number for hot tax that we had last year, and it's possible that it would be a little bit higher, and Pam Kerbo suggested the $43,000 number for, she said if we prepared a budget for the $500,000 like we had last year, and then come up with a list of contingency items to come if we did get more money by the end of the year, if we got that approved as a list of contingency things, we wouldn't have to go back to city council to spend it if we got more. So, I did not come up with things to come with that 43, but I just plugged in the 500 like we did last year.
So our estimated income for this fiscal year that we're in right now is $505,000, which is at the top of page 1. Proposed budget $500,000. If we go to the bottom of page 2, our total expenses, as I see in the estimated actual for the 12 months, the third column is almost $519,000. So there's a $15,000 difference there.
Well, last year we had a pull from reserves to help cover that in the
Right.
budget.
We're still on worksheet 2, right?
Worksheet 2?
Yeah, okay.
So at the bottom worksheet 2, our estimated expense is $518,923.
That's worksheet 3, isn't it?
I'm on number 2, draft.
518 is 3. 2 is.
I'm sorry, I'm going by page number.
Oh.
I apologize.
Page number, okay.
Yeah,
So we're on worksheet 3, we're on worksheet 3.
Worksheet 3.
Am I jumping ahead? I'm sorry.
Okay, well, worksheet 3, I just want to tell you, I separated restricted versus unrestricted.
Okay, let me.
That's the difference in 3, and that's not the way the city looks at our budget. They just look at the overall thing. I thought for our purposes, if we wanted to look at restricted versus unrestricted,
Okay.
and that may not be the best.
Let me back up then.
I just wanted to quickly ask on 2.1 as well. Is there a reason reserves is highlighted?
Only because, no. Only
just curious.
because I needed to know, I wanted y'all to know that that was in there.
Okay.
And, actually, it was because it was highlighted last year and I didn't change it. It's really like, I mean, we are required to turn in a balanced budget. Unlike the federal government, we can't spend more than we bring in. So we have to show what makes it balanced. And that, right now, the reason this says draft up top is because this is a working document and y'all need to help me. I just put that in there as a plug number for where we are, and we have to decide that. If we don't want to put $56,810 in reserves on there, then obviously we need to cut down the expenses or figure out where you're gonna make money.
And the estimated actual would actually have us going $12,000 into those, that 71,000 reserves.
Right.
So we're, even though we haven't broken into it yet, we're expecting that we're going to
Well,
spend at
yes,
least 12.
yes,
Okay.
it is possible.
Unless our income's actually will be
Right.
projected.
Right.
Which is possible.
Which is possible.
Let me ask, for this fiscal year, are we going to have to go into reserve?
Well, that's what he was just asking, and it's possible that we will. If the hot tax comes in for the second quarter, which should come in sometime this month, I can make 2 or 3 more payrolls, but I probably will not make it all the way to October the 1st. I probably will not.
And if you look at that estimated actual on worksheet 2, page 2 at 531, and then our budget of 590, which includes that $71,000, that's where I was estimating that we'd break it. We'd break about 12,000. We'd use about $12,000 of that 71,000 in reserves. But we need to make note that there's still a chance, even though we haven't gone into the reserves yet, if everything goes as projected, we will slightly.
But not the 71.
But not the
It
71.
would probably be a lot less than that.
Significantly less.
We would probably have to go in about 10 or 12. Well, my estimate is 524 here and 531.
Yes.
So that's where he's talking about the difference.
So we could, so when we're looking at the budget for next year, that kind of maybe give us a roadmap as to what we would need to allocate in reserves.
I mean, part of this process is to determine what it takes to make this place run and what we need, and that's y'all's job. I give you the numbers, you know the that. That's a pretty cookbook. Merchandise sales has increased slowly every month. We've got more stuff down there, and, I mean, merchandise sales is also offset by what we're purchasing, so the profit margin on those is small, but it is increasing a little bit. Like I said, room tax, we're leaving the same at 500,000. The membership dues is what we charge the bed and breakfast facilities that are in the county. The ones in the city pay hot tax, so we don't charge them. We only charge the ones that are on our brochure that we basically advertise for them. Let's just say several of them haven't paid this year, and I'm not sure that they're going to. I cut that down a little bit because I think that they are relying on internet and other things, and Sherry said if they don't pay, we'll take their name off the list. That's kind of where we are. I just cut that down because of that. The restroom trailer, like I said before, income and expense are going to move to the balance sheet, so we will collect any rentals and pay for the expenses out of that. Reserves is a fill-in. Okay, personnel expense. Last year, I think you can see on the, if you go back to your July form, what we did was just estimate what the benefits, additional benefits and going over to the city was going to cost us. Pam gave me a number of 46,000, that's what we put in the budget. It hasn't come quite to that point for whatever reason. I didn't really vet that number a whole lot, that's just what they told us it might be. I just took the estimates and rounded a little bit to say that the proposed budget is 292. I asked if there would be a cost of living adjustment in January because there was last January. And Pam said they were not planning for it in the city, therefore we're not planning for it. So I did not increase that. Accounting and legal. Because I really didn't know. Yeah, 7,900, so. So I don't know, that will be paid out of this fiscal year, so that estimate will be higher. For this 12 months will go, so that, this is something that will dip into those reserves probably. Will push us into that.
To pay for the audit.
To pay for the audit for last year, yes. We will still have to pay the city for the audit for this current year we're in. I don't know when they'll do it, but I assume we'll have to pay for it sometime during next fiscal year. And I just put 8,000 in there, who knows? I have no idea what the city audit cost will be. Surely it'll be close to the same. Maybe it'll be less, I don't know. Credit card fees, engraving expense, those all are pretty average standard. Dues and subscriptions, this is our membership dues to associations and groups that we're in. Sherry helped me look at those and say we're going to renew this one and we're not going to renew this one, and that's the number we came up with. Insurance, I put 5,100 on there because we are currently paying our D&O and our general liability and property insurance to the city. We just reimburse them every month, they bill us for it. We currently have an additional policy, it's called an inland marine policy on our artwork. It renews on August the 19th, and one of the decisions I need today is whether we want to continue doing this and renew this or not. The city increased, I talked to Buck over in the finance department, he deals with most of the billing on this. They increased the property contents of this building to 200,000. It was at 100,000, and it's been increased to 200,000. That's the maximum TML insurance will let them go up.
What is that, how much is that art
This
policy
this
for?
policy is, it's $2,548, and the limit of coverage for the artwork is $221,750. I have no idea where that number came from. Sherry had, it was her girls, right, doing, one of her daughters doing an inventory. We have a current inventory right now, and it is a very exhaustive list with almost no pricing. Nobody can give us, I mean, I don't know how to get values. If any of y'all have resources, should we go to Rick Still and find out? When I was talking to Buck about this, he said, well, one of the major concerns is there's a lot of things in here that are one-of-a-kind thing, and putting a value on it is really tough. If the building burned down, you couldn't go buy another one.
Well, we have value of Rick Still's property, the guns and things like that,
Okay.
but those are, I think those are $25,000 a pop estimated value. I mean, so that's where it adds up quickly. The artwork down here, the artwork is what's harder to price, just because they're local artists, one of a, you know.
They're all one-of-a-kind stuff.
So we've increased our coverage from 100,000 to 200,000 overall, so there's 100,000 more there that we have.
Well, I mean, Bud mentioned, and I totally agree with him. He said, your contents probably weren't, without the artwork, let's just eliminate that part. You're talking about desks, chairs, tables, computers, things like that. Probably isn't on the street worth 100,000. We just sold an engineering business, and it's disgusting to think how much you can actually sell things for, and you can't. I mean, you think garage sale? No, nobody wants your stuff. It's horrible. So if you went to an insurance company, if this building burned down and you say, we lost 9 of these tables, they'll give you $10 a piece. I mean, they depreciate everything. Because and especially if you don't have a list of, this is what we paid for it, and this is what we have. And right now, I'm not sure we have that great of an inventory of tables and chairs and all that. That's something that probably needs to be done. But computers are not worth as much as what you pay for them. They just aren't. And, you know, Buck was kind of saying this, and I said, yeah, I kind of found that out the hard way. So really and truly, 100,000 is probably, I'm not an expert by any means on this. I'm just relying on what he said. You might consider, you might have 30 or 40 or possibly $50,000 worth of furniture and assets, and then consider you have 150,000 on your other stuff. Again, if the building burned down, we would have to prove what we have here and how much it's worth.
So we have to prove up to 221,000.
And honestly, the last time I talked to RM Blake about this policy, they want a list of values of everything too, in order to cover this. For if we're going to cover this for 220, if we want to get a check for 221,000 from them, we're going to have to prove that we've got $221,000 worth of stuff here. So they're asking for the same thing. We want a list of this is this, and we don't have it. Buck's final answer to me was, you're across the street from the fire department, you're probably not gonna burn down. I mean, I don't know. Really, theft would be more of a.
So what we need to do for either one of the insurance policy or not is, we have a list, now we have to put pricing with it. Right, and submit that to.
Well, they have the list. They want that. I think that as long as we pay them, they'll just keep doing it for this value. But their answer is going to be, if you're insuring this at a risk and you want to check for it when something happens, you better have a, you know.
And Roy Blake has the values of the case merchandise,
Mhm.
Rick Still's things, he has that. Like I said, the only thing that we're missing are valuations of actual on-the-wall hanging pieces of.
Well, let me ask insurance people, what do they find acceptable of who prices artwork, who values artwork? Is there?
Well, that's usually done by an independent appraiser. If you want.
The Co-Art Center, would that be an acceptable option, or?
Well, you might have Don
Henley could probably do it.
But, you know, when it's, you know, local artists, it's hard to value. But they could probably put some kind of value on
Because, I mean, if we can get all the insurance, what you're saying is we can get all the insurance we want, but if something happens and comes time to get paid, if we don't have.
it. Well, they'll pay you what it's valued at the time.
Well, we don't want to pay for any more than we can prove up when we have to make the claim.
Right.
you know, if we can only prove that we have $150,000 stuff, worth of stuff here, if it burns down tomorrow, then we only want to pay for $150,000.
There's no reason to pay for the other
Right.
additional
Correct,
policy.
correct, I agree, but even that extra 150, you have to prove that this artwork is worth that at some point. So we have to get someone to value it, or the insurance company won't reimburse us. So we can have no policy or a bunch of policies, if we don't have that, it will not.
Well, it's good to have the complete inventory, this looks like you got a good start on that.
Yes,
Really, with the
yes.
roads for you. But I will list all these down, we will put an approximate value, and keep that list off premises somewhere where the building burned down, didn't burn the list, I think.
Do we,
Very good idea.
If that were to happen, then what is the agreement with these artists? Or would we have to give them that money because it's their artwork? Are we paying to insure their artwork? Or are we paying because we would get money then
To go buy new
to
stuff.
purchase new artwork? Because if the money would have to go to them because of the agreement we have or don't have with
Well, where's
them,
the agreement?
I don't know.
Did they donate it, or is it online?
Right,
And I think it's different for each one. It's not one.
Maybe.
so I would say we need two lists then.
Right,
Well,
and we shouldn't
They
worry
should
about.
probably be identified and give it an approximate value, and if it's your own loan and the building burns down, then I would have to wheel in the money once you collect it.
So then we're insuring their artwork for them.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should be in the business
Well, it's
of.
under our care, custody, and control, I mean, we're responsible if it's on loan.
And that's not such a bad deal. It's like, we're either, you know, I mean, if we bought it from them, we'd be insuring it as well.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, we have control of it, and we're responsible for it, so.
Okay,
Have it
so-
on the list, and sure, with an approximate.
Well, the question is, would they want the money? Would they?
I don't see that many people coming to us and saying, I want you to pay me for that painting that
Right.
Mhm.
in the midst of all of this other troubles that you're having because of the fire.
Well, it's more than fire too, right? Water damage or.
Oh, yeah, or that.
Or
That.
electricity hits and all our computers are zapped and,
And that
All
begs
this
the
floods down
question,
here or something.
I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear what
do we know what we have, and do we have everything, a
We have
pretty good
photos
value
of everything.
on computers and tables and
Oh, on that, no.
stuff like
Just
that?
artwork.
Because obviously that we have to prove up that amount too.
When is this policy due?
August the 19th. I mean, I started talking about this back in February, and I had a hard time getting answers in the city, and then,
Well, when you run into, damaged goods, I mean, if you're gonna schedule everything with a value, that's one thing, but if you're gonna lump it all together, that's another. So there's unscheduled property, and then there's scheduled property, so you have to make a decision which direction you want to go. I still think a good inventory list with approximate value is probably one of the best things you can do, should there be a catastrophe.
How would it work if we did it as?
Well, same way, it's just gonna be approximate value, but you need a list no matter what.
Okay.
So if you schedule, you're scheduled for a specific dollar amount, like you do with your home stuff. I've got a Rolex watch that's worth $18,000, and so that's what happens, so.
What's the cost of this policy again?
$2,548. Well, that was last year. I haven't done a renewal yet.
Okay, so have you added it, is it in this budget, or is it?
It's in there.
Okay.
If you look at the line for insurance, 5,100 includes what's paid to the city plus the additional artwork policy, and I rounded 2,550. I don't know exactly what that's gonna be, because I haven't gotten,
All right.
it's interesting, we probably should have gotten the renewal by now.
Usually 30 days ahead of time.
Yeah.
We can further discussion on that, but determine that, so let's.
Okay, if you want to go ahead, yeah, we need to make that decision, but I'll go ahead. Maintenance contracts, this is basically elevator, security, and fire alarm, and they are what they are. We don't have any real choices on that. The next 4 items, the technology, computer hardware, computer software, tech support, and building and cleaning supplies, last year were all included in office supplies because we were not given a separate budget for that. Sherry discussed that she would really like to have those things separated out, and we just put some numbers on there. I don't know how realistic any of this is. I kind of went through and looked at the cleaning supplies, and the problem is, a lot of times these are all lumped in on somebody's credit card. They bought 2 computer cables, toilet paper, and, Mike Day puts everything on his credit card, and copy paper. So it's really hard to, without going through every single invoice again, it's kind of hard to, I was just kind of estimating, our computers some of them are pretty old. We don't really know. We don't have a good handle on whose is what age and how much software we're duplicating. It just hasn't been managed.
Let me ask you this real quick, Cheryl, on the year-to-date expenses, at $7,500 is in the office supply line.
That's everything.
That is everything, but
Yes.
it's a couple grand over budget.
Yes.
It's a couple grand over budget. Do we know, was that a lot of little things, or?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Nothing real big. It's just a lot, because the building and cleaning supplies and the technology and all of that's in there.
So if we think, if that is our actual, I see you've spread that out, so that comes out to be about the same amount.
Right. And that may or may not be enough.
But does this include any of the proposed improvements to technology? Okay.
No,
It's
that
just
was
as
what
what
I,
That's just maintenance. That's
Okay.
just kind of,
I've got prices for that. Ryan with Nacogdoches gave me 2 different options and what it would involve. He gave me pricing for 5 new business grade computers. It does not include monitors or anything else. It's just the actual computer, which should be fine. He gave me pricing for 5 and for 7, and then also to pay up front and then to pay it out. And that includes that includes Microsoft Office for the computer, so that software would be handled 50 support hours a year, every 3 years, or anytime anything goes wrong with the computer, they would just come in and replace it.
And we're looking at this technology upgrade because there's issues with the current technology, is that?
Where we're at right now, we have no backup of anything that we have. The computers are all at varying ages. We have duplicated licensed software. If we were to have a power surge now and our computers went down, fortunately, most of our stuff is shared, so we could probably backtrack and piecemeal it back together, but we do not have one organized, overarching system in place for backup. The pricing that Nacogdoches gave us would involve an offsite server that would back up. It would be co-located here in town with them. Just for grins, the pricing, Nacogdoches is who we contracted out. They do our phone as well, so. It's Elliott Electric's division.
Well, the computers are varying ages. I mean, if we have one that's 5 years old and one that's 1 year old, we may need to replace the 5-year-old one, but the 1-year-old one, we may just need to put.
We don't have any that are just 2-year-olds, so it's like, which is 3 years and which is, I think they're all probably at least 5 years old, so, I mean, we're
Well,
already.
at that point, it would make sense to get them.
Yeah.
Did we get any competing bids on this?
No,
And then 2, do we have anyone who can evaluate kind of our system independently? So, I mean,
Scott Waller has offered to do a technology audit for us for a fee. That is also, he has not, I didn't pursue.
how much is that?
This to buy up front for 5 PCs, and that involves just the only high-speed computers we really need with a better graphics card would be 2, and that would be for Stephanie and I. The others would still be business grade i5 computers that are great to do everything else, but if you're doing any kind of graphics software, we just needed that. So anyway, for 5 PCs, to buy up front, it would be $8,249.85. For 7, it's $10,189.79. And it includes the computers, Office 365, 2 graphic video cards, 50 hours of IT support over a 3-year contract period. IT support can be purchased individually or in another bundle if we would need more than that. Be a one-time fee for the PCs, tech support, graphic cards, 3 years of Office. A server could be added to this option for an additional cost of $2,500. In this instance, buying it up front, we would go to getting individual 4 to 5 terabyte external hard drives and doing the backups manually ourselves.
So 8,200 is for the 5 computers plus Office plus 50 hours of support.
And 2 graphic cards. And then for the 7 total, it would be $10,189. They offer a rent-to-own option for the exact same thing, except it does include the server option. In that, for 5 PCs, it's $291 a month. And for 7 PCs, it's $475 a month.
Is this who the city uses?
No, the city has their own IT department. It is very small, and they're already spread very thin. They have been very kind to come over and help Cheryl where they can, but right now we have nobody.
We can't use they can't audit us?
No.
I mean, I think that, you know, I understand very much the importance of technology. And I know that when you don't have the proper tools, everything takes 2, 3, 4, 5 times as long as it would take if you had the proper equipment.
Or sometimes
Or you just can't do
it
it.
does whether you have the proper equipment or not.
Yeah,
I had a week like that.
I me too. And so I want y'all to have the, you know, everything that you need to be as productive as possible. But I don't, you know, there's that part of me that just feels uncomfortable turning it over to one company and saying, you tell us what we need and we'll write you the check. Because technology is such a myopic subject for most of us. You know, I don't, if somebody quotes me, you could interchange the 7,000 to 10,000 or whatever on any of those, and I wouldn't know whether it was a good deal or a bad deal. And I know a little bit about backup, and I like the off-site backup better, but you know, we may not be able to afford that. But I'd like an expert's opinion that's not going to be making money off of.
I'm happy to bring in Scott's company. I'm happy to do it.
And do we think, and
Will he offer a quote?
do we think that
Does
they're
he do this?
qualified?
He does, I don't believe he does the actual leasing of equipment.
He does, you can purchase,
Yeah.
but you can't lease them. And I'm familiar with Nacogdoches because I use them. And
Yeah.
we were constructing our technology for the hotel. We priced out a lot of different companies in this, and they were by far our best option for a couple of reasons. Is that they have a staff of 30 programmers sitting a couple miles down the road, and they can dial in and do anything that they need. We have an off-site technology, the server, so we don't have to worry about backups at all. What we chose to go with is because they keep us up to date constantly. If you do the monthly contract with them, they take care of all equipment and all software updates. The 365 alone, when we first started, we were buying those, and it's $200, $300 per license for 365. And so we chose to do that because it made economic sense for us. But I would like to see perhaps what Scott says as well. But
Well, I think all it would be, I mean, just determine what we got and what we need.
The one big thing, and Scott offered, because we had to have him out, that's who our contract for our copier is with. Their minimum contract is 5 years. And he will do, for a fee, he'll come out and he'll do an audit as well to tell us what they would be able to provide for us. I asked Nacogdoches if he would come do an audit for us, and he said, you really don't need an audit, your wiring is fine. Like, he didn't try and upsell anything, and he just asked exactly what do you need. Their contract is 3 years, and while that doesn't seem like a big difference for us, you know, I walked into a situation where I walked into 2 5-year contracts that had been signed by previous directors that we're having to ride out.
And that copier
Yeah.
contract is eating their lunch.
It is.
Who's that third?
Scott Waller.
Scott.
And the other is our Pitney Bowes, and, you know, it's that 2 years, that's a lot for a small CVB. I mean, we just don't have that much money. So, like I said, I'm happy to do as the board directs, and we can get some audits out. I don't know that the answer is gonna change that much. I would be shocked if they would be able to come in comparable. This is, I do know about enterprise and business software and computers and everything. And it's a really good deal, especially with the tech support. And I will say that since fiber has come in, we just got that 2 weeks ago, we've been able to experience if we're down, I send a text message, within 20 minutes we're back up. I mean, we're getting, there's more of an ease of access. But I'm happy to do as directed if we have the time to do it. I don't know at this point if time is on our side to get Scott in, but I'll have him call him this afternoon.
And I'm not that thrilled about having, is it not Scott, but just, another company doing it. I think that Elliott, I didn't realize that Nacogdoches and Elliott were the same. Elliott has a sterling reputation in this community, as does Scott, but they're just for different things. And as far as computer networking and everything, I'm very comfortable with having Elliott Electric do it. My only question is just having some, and ideally it would be the city guys, but you say that they're spread too thin. But
That's what I've been told. And at this point in time, we're still negotiating what that relationship looks like. We are hybridized, kind of a part of the city, but not so much that we can really start to be serviced by all of their departments. So, right now our relationship is more just on a financial end for payroll and benefits. Mr. Jeffers is well aware of, what we've encountered with the phone system going down, and I think he's making the best decision right now. And that's not to say that relationship might not change, but, if we can get into something with a smaller contract range, then I think that gives the city some time to expand to fit its growing assets, us included.
I want to mention, I happened to talk to Pam Kerbo at the city council meeting last night and just asked her if they had ever billed for their IT services. Because we get billed for insurance and payroll and everything else. And she said, no, most of their IT, they do some interdepartmental transfers, budget-wise, because their IT also services fire and police, which are on separate budgets from the general fund. And she said, we do some sort of valuation on that. Because I asked her, I said, we were approaching this problem, and I said that Matthew and Michael have been over here a couple of times. My computer has to be hooked up by VPN to the city in order to do the payroll, and so they take care of my computer. It's a two-way street. They don't want me sending them bad stuff either, so they are protecting themselves to do this. And they've been over here a couple of times because I've had some issues. And they are very familiar with all the stuff in here, and I wondered if Pam said she didn't think there'd be a problem if we could work out with everybody the time that they could possibly help us with this audit. Even if we go someplace else to buy what we need, that maybe they could help us. I mean, Matthew sat there and told me he knew exactly who had my machine before, how long, when it was purchased, what software was on it. And he said he knew the one in Joanna's office was this or that. He was very familiar with that. So maybe if we could just pay them an hourly rate to do the audit and tell us if what,
Be addressed, and I would say, do we think that these numbers in here, the computer hardware, software, that 1,000 and 1,500 support, that would part of that be absorbed if we went with new technology? It wouldn't be completely on top of these numbers, would it? Some of that would be absorbed because if we get new
Yeah.
hardware and software,
yeah.
it would take out of this 1,000 and 1,500.
Well, a lot of what I estimated in the office supplies, that 7,500, when Sherry got here, she had to have some new cables and some, like a new keyboard and software. And so a lot of it was kind of startup for her. Some of it was just random, a hard drive for something, a backup drive for somebody. I put the QuickBooks back up on a jump drive and take it home with me because I don't want to repeat that.
Well, I would just wonder
And things like that, so.
if we should anticipate it's going to happen, right? Anticipate the higher cost of technology in the fiscal budget coming up, regardless of who
Yeah,
does
I
it.
mean, even if we paying for an audit, probably blow that budget.
We
Yes.
need,
Those three
I
things.
think the audit will show, I think we need some new technology in this building. So I
It's a
think,
backup.
yeah,
Backup.
this would be something that we need to look at.
It's not-
So the three that I have the three tech categories right now have, $3,500, obviously from Sherry's numbers that won't cut it.
What are we looking at, more like 12,000?
If we went with the pay it out for the 5 computers, it's $291 a month, and that would cover almost all of our software. Stephanie and I do an Adobe cloud subscription for what we need, but that's really the only.
3 years, as they said with us, they said because in 3 years, your computers are completely worthless. So they're pretty much worthless the first year you get them because of new technology, but they can keep it up, and in our case, they're gonna give us new computers every 3 years and such, but that's.
And they're buying at a higher volume, so they get.
They have great buying power. They're a billion-dollar company, so they, and I know in this particular case, because I talked to them, some of the higher-ups were questioning why we given such a good deal to people, because they're in the business of making money, and there's not a lot of meat on that bone, as they say, for this proposal. But they are very willing to work whatever the CVB or whatever our needs are. So they will add, take, do whatever we want. And they did the monthly option to make it more palatable because of the condition that all the technology is in. But I just wonder, should we add a couple of thousand to that line in anticipation of this happening? What I don't want to do is have to keep going back if we get this budget approved, go back and say, now we're going to have to draw out of reserves, we're going to have to draw out of reserves. I'd rather bite the bullet in the beginning, so as we
I agree.
anticipate.
I agree.
So can
If
we
we
add?
did the monthly for let's just say for the 3 years, at the end of the 3 years, it might be that only one thing or two things need to be replaced, and we might could do those in bigger chunks. Because
Correct.
if we,
And if we did 5, we could pass 2 on to the interns and replace 2, maybe if we did 5 instead of 7, that's how we could stagger. But I don't want to spend an hour making one diamond over whether we do 5 or 7.
Well, I
If we're happy with the process.
can say that the computer that Stephanie has and I have were purchased in 60, and those could be the 2. But there were actually 2 other computers that were purchased for the interns last year, but they didn't have Office on them. So we've got a computer that doesn't talk to the other computers. But those could be audited and they could be upgraded.
and maybe
Oh, yeah.
just upgrade the software on those instead of buying a whole new computer, so that.
So like while the
would be-
computers were purchased in 16, they aren't 2016 computers.
They aren't? Oh, they were used at the time.
Well, I mean, they weren't used, but they were sale, I mean,
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
Year models.
Yeah, the year model, yeah.
Older, and so they're.
They're getting to that end date if you look at 19. is what you're
Yeah.
saying,
Oh, yeah.
But
Okay,
the
so
other
I-
two that don't have software
I
might.
try to make mine last as long as possible, my company always calls me and they're like, your computer won't run it won't even hold the new software update. I'm like, I bought it 5 years ago.
What are you talking
So
about?
that's how I bought a pair of shoes.
I think we can get away with at least the two for the,
I think
I
we
have
need
two
to,
stations upstairs, I could use two other interns.
I think we need to go ahead and add some money to the
Okay.
hardware.
I think we need to budget for it because we're gonna need it anyway.
Let's budget for it and then
And
decide the
just-
specifics in our, we need to do that.
Do you want to make just one tech category and just make it like 4,000?
Well, that's,
Or
whatever.
You could,
Sherry's coming.
with this, you could combine support and hardware together, because that would, and then that would still leave us some wiggle room. I have a hesitation lumping it all into one, just because software would be where we would need some wiggle room.
So make the hardware and support, 3,000, 4,000?
I would say 4,000.
Just make it 4,000, that would, for both of those together. Well, the 300 per month would be 3,600, so. Okay, so make those two categories 4,000 and leave software 1,500. And then we can, I mean, that 4,000 is actually going to include some software.
Yeah.
The 360 and all
Yeah,
that. So this
yeah.
would just be the
Some of our
specialty stuff.
software is paid for through marketing, isn't it?
So basically what we're budgeting for, we're budgeting for new hardware. We're adding for new computers, depending on whether it's with A, B, or C company.
Yep.
That's what we're doing, right?
$4,000
Yes.
for
And
compute,
the
for hardware and support. Okay,
Absolutely.
okay.
All right.
If you want to skip down, the telephone internet kind of goes with this too. If you notice, we had 4,500 last year because that was our AT&T phone bill plus the AT&T DSL lines plus, well, no, that's all it was. It was just telephone and internet. Because I assumed that at one point we bought the phone system because we weren't paying anything for it. So I assumed that it was purchased way back when. Well, that blew up in December.
Yeah, it just got.
It just blew up. So we no longer have a phone system. We had to go to Elliott, and we have been paying monthly for renting or leasing the phone system plus the AT&T lines up until now. They got the fiber in.
The fiber is in, and the numbers will port over to digital on the 17th, so we can cancel our other lines.
I think when they port them, they automatically go away, but yeah.
Yeah, but we need to double check and make
So
sure.
will
check
the
that.
cost go away as well?
For the AT&T, Elliott absorbs all that, and it just becomes a flat $700 a month for the system, we're leasing the system, right? And the lines go through them somehow. That's magic.
So remind me, we leased the system because the upfront cost for the system would have been, we would have had to go into reserves for.
I guess, I
It's-
don't know.
It's a very expensive
Very
system.
expensive.
Yes.
That they have. Now, and did you say that includes the fiber optic internet is included in
Yes.
this number?
The $700 a month is the internet, the phone, and the leasing the equipment.
So that's it, and that's where you come up with the 8,400.
It's 700 times
And
12,
there's,
yeah.
we don't, yeah, it's 700. Okay.
And that's gonna stay constant, right?
I
Yes.
guess,
It's
yeah,
flat.
that's what, it's a.
Is it?
But it's a significant increase from last year's budget. I just wanted to make sure
Is it a
that,
significant increase in functionality?
Yes. It will, it already has been in the time since they ordered, it's only been a week. And there's been some snafus in switching us over to the fiber completely. And they do that at night, but that's been fixed within moments. But, I mean, there was times that when it would go down, we would have no computers and no phones. And it just made us useless to anybody that wasn't at our door.
It's horrible.
Yeah, that happened Monday. That was the last time, right?
Yeah.
well, there's just no comparison. DSL is nobody, but nobody uses DSL anymore. And that's what we
And that's
had.
what we.
That's what we were paying, well, I did. I paid $68 a month for that. Because that's all we could get in this building until we got the fiber,
So now we'll have functionality for ourselves, but it's also something that we can market to events, to meetings that come in this room, and to visitors we can now start promoting free Wi-Fi or whatever for the travelers, so it's beneficial.
And it works now.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just more technology stuff, so.
Right above that, the fire alarm, need fire alarm upgrades.
That happened from the
That came
inspection.
through from the city inspection. Chief Kiplinger is still working on getting that sourced out for us, and he's handling that entire bid process, finding but that was something that we brought before board, and board approved doing it, so we are getting a new monitoring system, because we weren't being monitored. I think that, yeah, we're getting the whole shebang.
Well, the line is, stays consistent year over year, so it's,
We don't have
We
numbers.
don't have
Cost.
numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know. The last one we did at our church, because it was about the same age, was over 10,000. So I don't know that this, I mean, a church is a public space that's got different doors and has little kids in it all day long and all that kind of stuff. So that, this may not be the same kind of thing. I don't have any idea. It's an age thing, apparently. It's kind of like, what we found out at church, it's kind of like computers. If they're a certain age, they don't talk to the rest of the world anymore. It's kind of weird.
so this is a known price increase. I mean, there's going to be an additional cost in this line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
right
the
now-
estimates were between 6,000 to 7,000 from what he said, but that's not firm. That was his best estimate.
And I don't know if that takes the place of what we are actually paying now. Would that absorb what we're doing now? Because we have some kind of monitoring, not paying something every
Well,
month.
that's a good point. If that 5,000, if some of that would be absorbed in that 5,000, it's
Right.
already budgeted there. Again,
So
budget-
maybe just an additional 2 or 3.
Yeah, I agree. This is a budget's an estimated guess. And so I think it'd be better if we added some more thousands into that line, because we know that there's going to be a cost increase. And so that we go, when we present to the city, that we feel confident in somewhat in our numbers. I don't want to have to keep going back and saying we're going to have to pull out reserve, because that's,
But what
we
we
know
need
this.
to allow for this upgrade that you're talking about, that she's working on, he's giving you some round numbers.
Round numbers.
He said his estimate was between 6,000 to 7,000.
Let's plug it in.
So just make, instead of 5, make it 7,000?
Yeah.
And we'll just say,
And that'd be saying that that's the only repairs that we're gonna need.
Well, it would be a new system and monitoring system, so hopefully it has some sort of coverage, some sort of warranty if there was any kind of.
And the system isn't broken now. It was just from 1999.
and they
It's
have,
good year.
they have a lot of, the codes change, and they require you to do more stuff around the church. The codes change, and you have to have this now, and you have to have this now, and if you don't make it, you get red tag. That's not a good thing.
It works, trust me, we set that alarm off pretty regularly.
All right.
I am scared to let it.
Oh, certainly, yes. All right, so we've talked about aging technology, aging fire systems. We're in a historic building. It ages as well, as I well learned over the last couple of years. There's expenses that are going to occur, and we anticipate these things happening. I think it would greatly behoove us to start some sort of a CapEx fund, put aside some money for capital improvements, so that when it's going to happen, it doesn't have to be an emergency draw out of reserve. It's a thought out, anticipated expense. And there are formulas that we use in our business, and don't necessarily need to go that drastic, but there's certainly things that are going to have to be addressed: paint, ceiling tiles, roof patch, various things that are going to be expenses, and I think that we need to start cookie jarring some money towards those expenses. It has never been done in the past, but I think it's just a good business practice to do.
If we had that, then the computers and stuff would be kind of coming out of that. We
It
would be addressing
it wouldn't be such a sticker shock sort of thing. You know, I know that a carpet can only be walked across so many times, so I anticipate replacing that in 5 years, let's say, or something. So you start accruing that fund, that money there, because right now, there's just no funds for the painting or patching or such, and so.
We find ourselves forced into a reactive stance instead of being able to be proactive. So, you know, that takes us out of the running to price match and shop around. And, you know, when you know the scope of everything that needs to be done, and sort of you have your own timeline and you're in front of those projects, then you can say, okay, well, this is in the plan to do in the next 2 years. Is there a patch that can get us to that, instead of, you know, the air conditioners went out last week, and when Tinker was up on the roof fixing that, he saw a hole in the roof and the I mean, it was just like, what else? And there's only so much Dimples can do for you across the street. To say, hey, there's a hole in our roof, did you want to fix that for us? So yeah, I mean, we just need to be in a better position to respond to situations instead of just having to react and going with.
Well, maybe we should start accruing for some of that. But
Can you carry it over from one year to the next?
Yes, that's what, the city has, it's called CIP, Capital Improvements Projects, and they do that. I mean, you know, the last sewer plant improvement was, you know, $223 million or something ridiculous. They accrue that over a lot of years before they
Right.
start doing things like that. Fortunately, we don't need anything quite that big, but.
I think we can fix it.
And I like that idea, but
It's pretty
I
thin.
absolutely agree 100% that we have to have a plan moving forward, and there's no time like the present to make that plan. But as long as we're dipping into reserves every year, we're really just pulling money out of reserves to put into a cap. At this point, what we'd be doing is pulling money out of reserves and putting into a capital improvement fund.
Another reserve.
Which is
Which is another reserve. So
How much-
theoretically, we can just spend at the point that we're using our income to fund our budget and no reserves, it would make sense to put some of our income into a capital improvement fund. But I don't know that it makes that much sense to put reserves into a capital improvement fund, because it would just be moving from one reserve pile to another. If we needed to replace the air conditioner, we probably would have to pull whatever we could pull out of the capital improvement fund out of reserves anyway. So the money, it's really the same money. I mean, are we making the
Right.
same interest on our capital improvement fund as we are on our reserves? If, you know, we want that money to sit wherever it's
Make the most.
wherever it's
Sure.
doing the most
No,
for
and
us.
that's a valid point, certainly. I just, from again, budgetary standpoint, in my mind is, when I make a budget, I try to anticipate every cost possible, because I'm looking towards an end result. And if I know something's gonna happen, I don't account for it, it's gonna change that end number, and that's what I don't want to happen, and you know, just
What if
trying to
is
anticipate.
this kind of
the
for
costs.
city council budgeting approval process? What if we said we are pulling, I'm just gonna throw a number, $25,000 out of our reserves to become a capital improvements project?
Well, to Damon's point, is we're gaining interest on.
Well,
it
I'm just saying
instead of-
approving for the budget. I'm not saying actually physically moving the money, just telling the
Just
city,
make a line
Just
item.
put it on
just
paper.
make it a line
Just
item.
put it a line item.
And
I'm just saying for city council approval purposes.
And I understand what you're saying is that if we wait to ask for the money to pull it out of reserves until we need it,
'Cause
then
there's
it
no-
looks like we were unprepared.
Yeah.
So I like that's kind of a hybrid idea where we just say, we want to allocate some of our reserve money for capital improvements as needed, because we see this, this, and this on the horizon. And we don't want it to be a surprise to us or to you, the city council.
Do we know, I mean, to me, in my mind, capital, the reserves kind of was our,
That's kind of what I thought
if the
too.
roof needs repair, that's
But-
what that was for, but do we know, I mean, I guess in reserves, you're supposed to have X amount of dollars for, you know, if some crisis happens,
Mhm.
and you have to maintain payroll. So do we know how much money we're supposed to have in reserves? I mean, it's
City
like
keeps, what is it?
3,400, oh, but right now we got 346,000 in reserves. Is that, okay, we should always have that much money and we should try not to ever touch it because that's what we would use for payroll in the event of a crisis. Is that a good amount, or should it, is that 300,000? Is that what that should be?
We've tried to follow the guideline of the city, and the city keeps, I believe it's 20% or so cushion in their budget. That's not required of us.
Mhm.
It's certainly prudent to do, but I don't think that we're far off of that number currently.
So
but-
20% of 565,000?
And I believe, it's in the low 20s, it may be 22, it may be 23%, but somewhere around 20%, I believe, is the cities that we try to keep with. Now, and agree, that is what our reserves are for, but I just don't like surprises, so I do know that there is going to be expenses, so if we anticipate and plan for them, I think it's received better than.
Oh, I agree 100%. And as soon as we're fully funding our budget with our income, I think we need to peel off some of that income for that. In the meantime, it's because we're going to be pulling it out of reserves anyway, we just need to decide how we want it to sound semantically when we present it to, you know, I mean, we're talking about the same thing. You know, we want to pull money, we want to allocate money in our reserves for capital improvements, so we don't look as if we didn't plan for those capital improvements when they happen, when we need them. So we just need to decide semantically how we want to do that, present it to the city council so that it accomplishes what you're saying, which is us being prepared and looking prepared. And then while at the same time, you know, not just moving money from one reserve account to another reserve account arbitrarily. Yeah. But I think that you bring up a good point, and I agree with you 100% that we need to prepare city council for our possible usage of that money, and however we need to allocate it, you know, let's, you know, determine that.
I just did a rough estimate punching out what we have, and we're at about almost 38% in our reserves, as a percentage of our budget.
Unrestricted or restricted?
Well, I don't know. We don't really know. I mean, when I talked to Gary about this at one point, he said, we don't have a lot of detail on when these things were put into reserves and where that money came from. There's not a lot of tracking in the past, and so whether they were restricted at one time, does that end over time?
That's right, and
The
that's why
other-
we have the two separated now.
Right, but when these monies were moved into those reserve accounts, those CDs and things, were they hot tax? Probably. Most of our income comes from that. So the truth is, 99% of your capital improvements are gonna be this building, and that's all okay to be restricted funds for. So unless you like go have parties or something with it, you're not. Capital improvements are generally something in this building, and it's all
As long as
legal.
we're not funding fireworks displays or Christmas parades, then we're.
Oh, and Gary said he found a city
Yeah.
that used their restricted funds for fireworks displays. He said, I heard you say that that wasn't, but he said, I know someone that does.
Oh, the Woodlands stuff. Every year.
Every year. Well, I kind of had this problem, this is kind of in the same vein. The quote, $43,000 possible in a contingency fund for And that could kind of be that, or it could be like, okay, we're not gonna upgrade the computers until we know that we have that, or that's not really a good answer, but. How do you put $43,000 in a contingency fund if we get it as hot tax when you're borrowing, $56,000 from reserves in order to make your budget balance? I kind of had a problem with how do you say that on paper when you present a budget, so I don't know.
Well, don't you get pricing on paint, you get pricing on carpet, you get, because,
Well, those prices will change by the time.
You pull out.
And the
I
43,000,
mean,
It's just an iffy, if the hot tax goes up, they kind of project right now that the hot tax is going to be going up. It has been the trend, that y'all have seen.
The rate or the amount?
The amount, and that's why they said, put 500 in your budget and put 43 in contingency, in case it doesn't come, you've got a budget that you can work with the 500, and then 43 in contingency. But in order to make the 500 work, we're pulling 56,000. Actually, the two things we just added means that's probably gonna go up. Because we added for the technology, and we added for the repairs and improvements. So-
But again, we'll go back to the very beginning, that 71,000 that we put in this budget, that's not what we're actually gonna have to pull out to
No.
balance this budget.
No, right.
So
We just have to, on paper,
it's planning.
we just have to show that it balances
I
on
don't want to
paper.
say worst case scenario, but
Right.
a more realistic view of what may occur if things stay the same, because you can't.
Well, part of the reason we're not pulling reserves is the payroll, when we moved to the city, did not go up as much as what we were told. That is a significant part of not having to get that 71 out. And there are other things. I mean, Stephanie and Joanna have done a really good job with their budgets, which we haven't, that's page 2, we haven't got to that part yet.
well, then 43 could just prevent us from going into the reserve. Could do,
Right.
it could just make our budget actually work
Balance.
without going into reserves.
Exactly.
I would still like to come up with some contingency projects, should we, because we're also looking at the beginning of collection of short-term rental, hot tax. So I think we are going to see an increase in oil and gas recovery is going to continue hopefully. So I would like to have some pre-approved and just have those discussions so that when they come down the pike, the process doesn't slow us down from jumping on it. So if it's, pursuing getting an app through Visit Widget, and we know that that's $7,500, once we get that money and we prove that we can do it, then we can just pull the cord, or, when we have another $7,000, I can have my press penny machine.
She really wants that.
My press penny machine for upstairs. It's really gonna be a huge.
I know this thing's
But she said there's not any
I just wanted to say that I don't think we should be in the business of building up a huge reserve. We get hot tax to spend it, to get people here. If 20% is what the city does, or 25, and for us, that would be 113,000. Let's pad that a little bit, maybe let's go for 150,000, just to be sure that we're sure. But then once we have reserves that we feel comfortable with, we shouldn't just continue to build that reserve. We're not in the bid, that shouldn't be our goal, is to have this huge $342,000 reserve. We should use that to improve the building. We should use that to get a press penny machine if that's gonna make people have a better experience here and make me want to come back. Spend the money, spend the money.
Well, maybe
And
that's,
we're here for
maybe
the
that should be the
services.
next answer, is go to the city and say, okay, show that we have 25% reserves, and spend the rest of it.
Right, get the best computers in here so y'all can do exactly what you need to be doing fast and feel motivated to go out and do more.
We have not touched reserves since I have started working. I mean, we have once or twice to borrow out of it for cash flow purposes. I've put it all right back. We have never pulled out of it.
And our services area, which is all the fun stuff.
Yeah, just in my experience, I'm used to being in a destination that is able to use all of its money, and you still put reserves. We reached a point in the past where we were sitting on upwards of $2 million in reserves, and what good and it goes to that point. That's not doing anybody any good. We could be funding.
That's not what it's for.
Right, we could be doing special grant funding to bring groups in and incentivizing them. We could be providing, you know, incentives to these groups so that we can build those relationships so that they want to come back. So
Even in
it's
this room, I look over there and people come in here and they see wires hanging out of the ceiling. We could make that look nice, you know, we could make
My
it.
son said it's a matter of
And-
time
and-
that
and
TV is
no-
fixing to go, and he said once it goes, all of this goes, because none of it is supportable technology anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's another technology, y'all. It's
It
coming.
is, it's coming.
Well, and that's the whole thing of just having a plan. So we know that the carpet upstairs was installed in 1996. And even at that time, it wasn't the highest, I mean, it was what they could do.
Right.
So that needs to be done, but then that's a whole process, because that's gonna be closing down that quadrant that's carpeted, and then how are we gonna move those heavy display cases? And while we have those moved, is there something else that we should do so that we're working smarter and not harder? So it's having another one of these Superfund meetings where we address just capital
Logistics.
improvements and the logistics of that, but
Well, and the day is gonna come, I mean, before we, and I agree 100% that it doesn't have to just sit on that money. But at the same time, I don't want us to all of a sudden be like, oh, well, let's just add another $200,000 to the budget. Because the day is gonna come, I mean, we are gonna have to replace that, but we're gonna have to replace that air conditioning unit.
Oh, yeah.
on the-
Soon.
And I mean, and that could eat up our entire reserves. I mean, I don't know, how much does one of those cost, John?
What ton, it depends on the tonnage, but 15, 20, I think we could get away with this building. Maybe-
So
maybe
we're gonna, you know, I mean, I think that we will just, in keeping everything healthy and up to date, which it looks like we're trying to do with the computers and with the phone lines, the fire, and, you know, the fiber optics and all of that, we're gonna find places to spend that money without.
And that Hancock is able to do what they do for us, for what they're charging, like, I feel guilty, because,
Well, I do agree, Shirley. If we go through and look at where the most impact for our guests and potential visitors and guests to us, we need to put that money towards there. We're not attracting anyone with a reserve fund, right? And that's our job, is to use these tax dollars to bring people to our community. And so if we use it for that, I have no problem pulling it out of reserve if it's going towards that goal.
The safest thing to do might be to say, come up with an amount, pull it out of reserves, show it in the budget as a capital improvement. Because anything we do to this building is okay to use for restricted funds. And pretty much it will I'm guessing in an audit, it will be questioned that most of those funds and reserves are restricted funds. So maybe matching those two things up would be the safest way to go, so that we don't get in trouble with auditors. And match those two things up. Let's just come up with an amount and say, we're gonna call $30,000 our capital improvement fund for this fiscal year. And just say, let's go for it.
And do we even have to move it in the back? Can we still
No.
leave it where it's making the most
Earmark it.
interest?
No, this is all budget,
Earmark
it's
it.
all paperwork.
Mhm.
I only move it when I have to.
And so like, where would transportation go? Like buses? What
Like
about-
buying a whole bus?
Well, we can't buy it, even if I just want to rent it, when I have groups. When people ask now, do y'all have transportation? I say yes, because I'm not going to. I mean, I want to say, yeah, we can get you around in a bus, because I know I have the buses. I just have to find out where the money comes from.
But I don't know how much, I really don't know how much to put into that, to do that. We just put 1,000 and 2,000, it's kind of round numbers. If the technology's pulled out of there, I don't know. The copier contract is a known entity. Postage is also a known entity, because we have contracts on those that were previously approved. Utilities is strictly electricity that's paid to the city. It has gone up, so I just kind of projected a little bit going up on that. The admin, meals, entertainment, meetings, and continuing ed were separated last year in the budget. Sherry said the funds were not that we didn't spend all that on continuing ed. I dropped that a little bit. I don't know, what do you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at, and the same thing in our dues, those, I mean, what we were subscribed to and a member of, they were all great, nothing was wrong, it was just in a matter of importance, priority, us bowing out for a couple of years isn't gonna hurt anything, and so when you cut out the conference for like TSAE or EA or whatever, so we took out a lot of those, but like this year, I'm going to TML conference. So it's kind of shifting, and Stephanie's expressed interest in starting travel and tourism college, which is that certified tourism executive, so that's an added expense that might push her over. Joanna's expressed interest in some training as well. Mike has not expressed any interest in continuing education opportunities. However, he represents us at the Tuesday Rotary. If we can, I would really like to cover his Rotary membership, as mine is, just as a representative, at least half, if not whole, for his, because he is a representative of us there.
And to me, we need to bump that up instead of dropping it.
Yeah, professional
That
development.
much.
It's just as important as your computers.
Yeah, I absolutely believe
Yeah.
in professional
So
development.
if we're already at 1674, or we estimate for this year, we're gonna be at 1674, but we wanna do some additional things, then should we at least have that at 2,000?
Well, if you're talking about Mike's stuff, it would probably go in the one above that. The Rotary goes in, for Sherry goes into meetings. The continuing ed is more like, she paid for the TML conference was
$395.
$385 or something like that. Those kind of things come out of the continuing ed.
I like the brainering, and having one for meeting and sales, and this is simple dues, so to me, I'm trying to do as much as I can with the webinars now, just to continue and.
As much as the board feels comfortable putting in there, and then if we don't use it, then that's a place, but it's nice to have it there should those opportunities come up, because sometimes it is it's a webinar, it doesn't involve travel, something that we can do, but we do still need to pay $100 a year or $200 there, so it would be nice to be able to do those and know that they're covered within the budget.
I will tell you on the one reason I dropped the meals, entertainment, and meetings, Tony kind of did several things that probably won't be repeated, so it was a little higher than I probably should have been.
So do we?
So I don't know, if you want to bump that up to include Mike's, we could go to 3,000 with that instead of 500 and put Mike, and y'all want to do that? Do we need to vote? Do y'all need to vote on that, or is this the whole thing?
Does the board, I mean, just because Sherry wants to, doesn't mean it has to be, but on covering Mike's Rotary membership, is that?
I don't think we have to vote on it if we put it in
We put it in the
budget.
budget.
We pay for yours, that's a community outreach kind of
Okay,
a thing, it's a minimal cost.
and we'll just tell him to put it in that category.
In continuing education, can we leave it at 2,500?
That's where we get a lot of our volunteers from as well.
Mhm.
We'll say
Yes.
this-
Oh, yeah.
this
Oh, yeah.
From there, so.
I would feel comfortable with leaving continuing
Yeah,
at
at
25.
2,500.
And then, okay, I guess that takes us to page 2. This is something we did last year in the budget, was group sales and marketing. It was not done previously, and this is something actually Tony started. He said he felt like Joanna and Stephanie needed their own budget to be responsible for, and that's why we broke these things down this way. Now, we adjusted this a little bit in our meeting last week to move, I've made notes over here, I don't know if you can understand. We had something called event hosting last year, and lots of things that Joanna has all these brilliant ideas all the time, just throws them out there. And does these wine swirl, the wine whiskey brew and all of these neat things.
Stroll.
All of those cool things. And they all went under event hosting because we had to have someplace to put. A lot of times there's money that comes in. This also muddies the water on the restricted and unrestricted. I struggle with this sometimes. She sells tickets to the wine whiskey brew tour, And they come in to the commercial account, which is the unrestricted account, because that's the bank account that they're tied to through the whatever funding thing. And then we have expenses that go with these things. Well, you could technically say that these expenses are bringing out-of-town people in, and they're legitimate use of restricted funds. When I talked to Gary about it, because I was really struggling with, should these be matched up with ticket sales in the unrestricted funds, or should they be, these are legitimate? He said that a lot of times he has seen groups look at it like 50% of the people that come are local and 50% are coming from out of town, that you can split your stuff.
And we have about a 52% out of town on these gigs, which I think is great.
Mhm.
So it's, you know, that's kind of something we're gonna have to, I'm still working on, and making sure that those are in the right bucket of expenses, but.
And we also got the sponsorship.
And the reason that this one came out, if you look at the dollars, we had 15,000 budgeted, and I'm saying estimated actual for 12 months is 43. It's because Joanna and I got sponsors for a lot of this stuff. Sponsors paying for the t-shirts, sponsors paying for the bus, sponsors paying for lots of, just for the whole event or whatever, throwing money at it. So that budget, that also considerably added to the fact that we don't have to go to reserves, because we're not spending all that $15,000. Now, she said she would really like to not have to spend so much time soliciting donations.
I don't mind it, because a lot of people dig it, and they're like, ooh, can I be a sponsor? But like, for example, we had Lumberjack Harley Davidson, which I thought was kind of clever, I mean, really inappropriate, because you're wine, whiskey, and brew, and let's go jump on a motorcycle. But I mean, I'm an 80s girl, so I think that way. But like Ted Smith, you know, we were talking about it, and I just don't know if State Farm would think that would be cool, but what, if we were to do the spot, same thing, same gig, hey, you know, go out, but if he were to,
Sponsor
on
the
the
bus.
marketing side, sponsor just the bus, to be, the whole pitch being, and be responsible, right? Let's do the bus. Now it's a different angle, it's a different pitch. But meanwhile, I mean, that's the way I think, it's like, where's the value for him to do that? But I still want a bus. I don't want to have to wait on some, you know, I want the bus because I want to plan out, like Sherry does, these fun things that we can do. We've had people call and ask about it right now, I'm like, putting it off for the fall. We'll do it again in the fall because it's too hot right now, but it's just because I don't want to sponsor.
Well, I
So-
think it comes down to, like, we just are not in the position to be able to blanket offer to everybody, yes, we can get you a bus. So you really have to take it on a case-by-case basis and say, what is gonna be our return for that investment of $500 to get them a bus, or however much that bus is? What are we gonna see from it? What are we getting back in room night stays? What are we getting back in sundry sales? That kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I'm talking about planning it like we did before, where it's a marketing push for people from out of town. There are people that say they want to do it for their own group, but I explain to them the way it works to push them, you know, to what we're doing down the road.
And you've been a good custodian. I mean, you got 15,000 in the budget, you only spent 3,600. So
Yeah.
you didn't spend it just because you had it. You got the sponsors where you could.
Right, well,
So-
you know, I think a lot of the job is to get the community involved, to understand the
Absolutely.
value of having customers, because that's really where the almighty dollar is, on, at least for the places I'm bringing them to.
And I agree. I don't want you out having to, I don't want you to have to spend your work time begging people to sponsor a bus, because we wouldn't otherwise have it, because we didn't budget for it. But if you can get the community involved, then all of a sudden, you know, if it's the State Farm people, the Harley Davidson people, then all of a sudden, they have an
And
an
vested
interest, and they're
right.
telling their friends and talking about it on social media.
Yes.
And, yeah, so.
So we left that category blank on the.
Well,
budget here.
this is because what Sherry and Joanna's vision is to move event hosting down under visitor services and call it servicing and events instead of event hosting.
Oh,
And then that would
And
cover
that
pretty
way,
bad.
it kind of opens us up to do a little bit different things. One of the things that we struggled with, where do you put it, is we've been buying goodie bags and the stuff to go in them for
That's a-
events.
that's
And
visitor
that's,
services.
that's visitor services. That's people that are coming here and we're doing things for them. So this was their idea to move it down here. So basically, it's the same budget, the 15,000, it just got moved down here.
Okay.
And when we did name tags for groups, those name tags were coming out of office supplies.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this
Right.
wasn't an office
That's
supply
really
cost,
not an
it's-
office supply.
Absolutely.
And if we're ever going to look at our numbers and look at, you know, what's our ROI on our servicing, or, then we need to figure out where to put things.
Exactly, and then we'll be able to match that up. As a matter of fact, we just got that cha-ching off of our simple view. We actually have a column now that created for expenses.
Okay, so that's the biggest change in sales. Everything else kind of stayed the same. Joanna said we could cut down trade shows. She wants to do some. We didn't do very many this year, but she wants to do some, but not as much as the $10,000 budget was. Kept her education travel about the same. Marketing,
Can I back up real quick
Okay.
on sales? And Joanne, you're comfortable with keeping your fan tours? Because I thought we had great ROI on fan tours.
You know, if it were me, I'd like to do more. Again, I got a chunk of that paid for as well. So
Yes,
the
that
fact that I
was-
came under 1804 was, I mean, we did a good job. I mean, I had
Yeah.
hotel, I had food paid for, and everything.
And under fan tours, it's not even just, not only bringing them here to our community, which is great because they get to see it and experience it, but if you go to Austin to some of those events that they have there, where they're collected as well, is that accounted for in
That is usually under.
trade shows or?
It's gonna, if not a trade show, it is definitely a meeting or a conference, like when we do the sales blitz.
We can change trade shows to trade shows and
Yeah.
events.
So, I mean, both of those, in my dealings, I've been told several times we need to get to Austin to some of these events and get in front of those people as well. But I think a fan tour is, there's no better way to sell your community than actually have them in the community.
Yeah.
And the response from these folks was fantastic and
We just
saw
had a
a
huge
lot of
group.
stuff.
Oh, it's amazing, you guys. And it's so funny is they came for the fan tour, but I just really push site visits. And I never can gauge how long that's gonna take, but in budget, what do you think, Jerry?
like the trade shows and the fan
Trade
tours.
shows, yeah, I mean,
I'd like to keep trade shows where it's at because we are looking at increasing or starting our wedding market, destination wedding, so I want to send her to some wedding shows.
one of the things I've talked to the business college yesterday, and Todd Brown and I are gonna try to do some things where, you know, where the alumni goes out and does their breakfasts and things like that. I wanna combine asking those people to come back and do meetings here. I mean, a football game's okay, don't get me wrong, but it'd be cool if they came back and experienced that building. And we were to recruit groups to go to the College of Business to have business within a business school, and then the students would be invited. So he's going through just a list of associations with me because several of the people over there are members of these associations, and I want to use them as my contact.
Well, if we amended trade shows to be trade shows and events, then we could bump that up, and so the things that aren't traditionally a fan tour, then that could encompass what John was referencing to Austin, but then also your business and the alumni events as well. We wanted to increase the trade show and events.
so where do we want to take that to?
I mean, we only spent about 800 this year, so.
Yeah.
I mean, that might still be a good number.
Just to actually use it?
Just actually use all 5,000?
Yeah, I mean, if I have to borrow it, I'll go get it.
All right, if we feel comfortable with it, it's good, but I mean, that's.
There might be a sponsorship, I don't know, I hadn't mentioned it to Steph and Sherry that to go on these breakfast things with the alumni, like in the alumni sawdust, our ad is about bringing your business back to have a meeting here. So I felt those breakfasts out of town, especially in the Houston, Woodlands, Dallas markets, would benefit, because those are my stomping grounds. And to physically be there with the business, it's one thing to sponsor it, it's another thing to speak to it, like, hey, we're here not only supporting the ad in the publication, but we want you to come back, because they haven't seen that new college of business. They haven't maybe even seen the updates in the new student center. Things like that, I think just makes sense if we're going to be advertising there, why not show a face to it? And they're alumni, makes sense. So there might be a little membership involved in that, and that's really whether you want to do that. I was trying to piggyback off the businesses' sponsorship, so we don't have to pay for anything. But, that's what I asked Todd. I didn't want to spend any money, but I'd go for it.
Just let me show up and talk to people.
Yeah, exactly.
And they might.
Okay.
Okay, so are you okay with what you've got?
Yeah, I'm good.
And just work within it and move things around?
Yeah.
Moving things around within the budget is not difficult. We can do that.
I think that before we get to these two sales and marketing areas, if we're gonna utilize money from reserves, I think
They could go in there
these
too,
two
yes.
primary areas to go
Yes.
to go into. So let's certainly keep that in mind.
Okay, marketing, one of the things that Stephanie and Sherry were talking about, the collateral. I think some of that ended up in office supplies, some of it ended up in event hosting, some of it ended up in, I don't know. Because we don't really have a good category for that. So one of the things we did was separate printed collateral from promotional collateral. Printed collateral is, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, the brochures and stuff that are in the racks out there that we give people, this is a bed and breakfast, these are the restaurants in town, those kind of things. And Stephanie looked at what she had spent before, and she said to just move $2,500 from the printed collateral budget into advertising. And she would just get all, because Hancock does all that stuff, it all kind of comes under the same avenue of advertising. So we moved $2,500 of the printed collateral budget from last year up to advertising. The other $10,000 went down, if you look under visitor services, under promotional collateral. And that will be used to buy stuff to go in the bags to, and I don't know, do we give it to people that come in upstairs?
Rarely. I mean, there's a few things like
Maybe a group or
yeah,
something.
Charlie stickers and buttons and that kind of thing, but primarily it's for the goodie bags.
For the goodie
or-
bags.
Yeah.
So basically that 12.5 under printed collateral under marketing got split. 2,500 went to advertising, 10,000 went down to promotional. Let's see, the other things in marketing, I think most of them stayed the same except the website. That's the simple view.
Yeah, so that,
The only thing that was spent out of that this current year was the $2,000 we spent for training.
I reached out to Simple View. I've got the contract here that we signed. So our CRM annual licensing, they have, it's $67.50. This time next year, 2019, that's when our CMS, our website annual licensing is up, and that is $24,550, so that's $25,000.
And that's gonna be in this fiscal year, if it's September.
Yeah.
Okay, that is not in here.
Yep.
So, I know we don't really have a lot of choice on this, but are we, after the training, do we feel, how's Simple View working out still?
It's I mean, we have a firmer grasp on how best to use it. We haven't had enough time since April to really get everything out of it, and then to replace it and go with something that in the long run would be better, you're still looking at a upfront cost of $18,000. So, my inclination is to stick with it for another contract round.
So it's basically $7,000 a year, Simple View, and then our website is $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
And now here's the thing, and here's something that this may be with the reserve, that, when we talk about spending our reserves, you know, I don't know anything about Simple View. But whenever I ask about it, I see a lot of conflicted looks on people's faces, you know, that, I mean, do we need to reconsider ditching it and going with something more appropriately sized for our organization? Or, you know, it seems like when we've talked about it, it's been that it's more something like for a bigger market than ours. And I don't, you know.
Well, we talked about scaling it back some, I think, or not, some of the bells and whistles that maybe we could.
I just want y'all to have, you know, as Shirley brought up, we do have reserves and we do have options. You know, I mean, if you think you could be more productive with something else, then it's.
I don't know how, when the decision was made, I don't know how anybody forecasted and saw this as being sustainable, honestly. That's my only hesitation. I
Right.
don't have any hesitation with the quality of the product, and it, you know, it does excite me. What Simple View does that others do not is they give you this, the CRM that allows you to really work on partner benefits and partnership, and it gives you a place to hold all that information. And then you also have your CMS, which is your website, and all of it shares information. And so it, you know, it gives you a lot more functionality. We could go with a company like Sapphire that I used before. They're a wonderful company. We could be up and running in 6 to 8 weeks for $14,000, but that would only be a website. Now, what they offer that Simple View doesn't, and they do not work together.
That would be too easy.
Yeah, they do ticket sales. They do, so that might be something that works better for how we operate, and then we could still do the 6,000. We could still keep Simple View as a CRM. That's what Tyler is doing. They have it for one and not the other.
And that's what Beaumont does.
It is really, it's really, really expensive and just not, to me, not sustainable without, like you were referencing, continually dipping into reserves. I don't see us ever reaching a point where we will be able to generate the income to cover this cost. And the reason we were able to get into it is because the city ponied up a fair portion of it, and I don't know why they would do that.
And the specific jobs, you know, that y'all are planning to do over the next year. You know, I mean, so.
Is the CRM the website?
No, it's the CMS is the website. CRM is,
So if we just did the website, like you were talking to Beaumont and Tyler do, that would just be the 6,000?
it would be, no, it would be
It's the other-
well, to Simple View, it would just be 6,000 a year to keep up the CRM.
Okay.
And then we could still get those data, we could still do those reports. Separately, we would have a different login for our website. And
So it'd be
then,
$500 a month to keep the Simple View in that aspect. I
Yeah.
guess.
Just the website?
and
Just
Just the
Simple
CRM.
View. The
Just the-
website's $24,000
Oh, okay.
annually.
for the licensing,
What is it for, say, you know, Sapphire, for instance?
it would be what Conroe paid for theirs, because I was in charge of switching them over from what we were using to Sapphire. I believe upfront cost was, I want to say 18,000 at the end, and then you pay $1,200 every 6 months, so that was their.
So we would be, so we would always pay for the adjustment in a year, and then after that, we would only be paying $2,400 a year as opposed to $21,000?
Pretty much, and then you'd have added functionality of being able to, they do ticket sales, Sapphire's customer base, and that's just one example. There are plenty of other companies out there, but they work a lot with state fairs and rodeos. They just work with smaller destinations, and so they have more affordable bundling opportunities for that. So they can, that's just what that's their niche that they cover.
So if you could just say what your wish would be, I would like.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah.
recommendation?
I wish
You know, we have, we talked about budgeting reserves, we talked about, what to do about the contingency spending for the 43,000. Can we build into that the possibility of switching to a Sapphire entire budget and then table the discussion for another day so that we don't hash all that out? So we just hash out the budget today, but we give ourselves the freedom to make decisions about Simple View and some potentially other, and I'm so way out of my league as far as discussing
Well, part of this
tourism technology,
is
but
set for you because there's a contract.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
we
was-
can't make this decision actually until the contract's
I
up,
think all the
right?
promises that were made initially, and again, I wasn't here, I wasn't part of the discussion, made to city council about the deliverables that we would be delivered. I think that is achieved through keeping the CRM with Simple View. I think the website, while nice and great, I just think it's out of our price range, and that's just the fact. That website licensing agreement, we still have about another year. It's up at the end of, what, June 20th? No, July
So
20th
it'll
of
be
next year.
next budget.
No, not next budget, still this budget year, but we've got some time to go get some bids.
Alternatives.
And so that we don't have a downtime, so that well before that 7/20 in 2019,
we got it.
and that $25,000 that's due, we could use that. We're still are gonna need probably $25,000,
In the
but
budget.
it's gonna be an upfront cost that won't recur.
Right, and it'll pay for itself in a year of getting out of that.
Okay, so we need to budget the 25 that is right now under contract would be due in June,
Right.
plus 6750 that's due in December?
Correct.
Okay, so we need to budget over 30,000 in that category. And then we can decide we're gonna pay the 6750 in December, no matter what. But sometime between December, we make sure that the ticket cost covers that. That's,
We
so.
made a profit on everything because I charged a little more.
Right, those kind of things, that also raise the water unrestricted, by the way, which he charges extra on the tickets. It kinda gets-
You're gonna figure it out.
I know. Well, I keep asking Gary, he says, well, I don't know. And I thought, well, you don't know. So the bus rental for other things and the name tags and the goodie bags and all that stuff will now come out of, well, actually, those are two different things. Servicing and events is one thing, promotional collaterals. Servicing and events is mostly things, and then this promotional collateral is stuff, is what I call it. They told me I couldn't put stuff in the budget, because that
Stuff and junk.
stuff is not really a budget term, but it's stuff, it's just stuff.
Tchotchkes.
That's, yeah, the pins and the caps.
So that category kind of, it looks like it goes up, but it's really due to the fact that we move things into it, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
One thing I just wanted to mention real quick, and I don't think we need to change anything here, but I talked to a lady Saturday who's been volunteering here once a month, she and her husband, for 9 years. And if we were having to pay people to work here on Saturdays and Sundays, it would be huge. And to find people who are willing to show up once a month for 9 years, and, no, Sue Sears.
It's Canterbury.
Yeah, they're
We
good.
take care of once a month too for,
Yeah.
I just think we have got to bump up what we do for them.
Yeah.
It
I agree.
is, we should
More than
be
once a
having
year.
one, and we haven't even had anything for them in the last couple of years. We have got to do that, and if it's getting, like when we have things come into town, like the vintage market days, giving them free tickets to that. Once a year, appreciation luncheons, we have got to,
More things.
Yes.
More things, for sure.
And some of that might generate a little more interest in becoming a volunteer.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
because we're getting kind of thin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to have that as recruit, and everyone should have a T-shirt too. Something.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. So I think we do need to increase that
Well,
number and be
it wasn't,
proactive in taking care of our.
we actually haven't, that $1,000 was budgeted and nothing, that 720 that was put in there is
Yeah.
because we paid for a deaf interpreter for a group. We didn't have any other place to put that in the budget. That's what that 720 was. It wasn't actually spent on volunteers, so.
Right, well, so.
Which we're now going to servicing.
The, certainly the appreciation luncheon or reception or celebration, we need to go, but I think a constant every weekend or whatever, that giving them some tchotchke stuff, T-shirts and tickets to whatever we have available certainly needs to occur, but just some, appreciation every weekend when they're here, that's, budget, whether it's donuts or what have you, but certainly, we without our volunteers, we'd be talking like a lot larger number to have this place open for our people. Take care of your people who take care of you. They take care of us, certainly.
It's really, and I mentioned it a lot when I first got here, because I was reminded of it every day. The industry trend is really to not even have a visitor center like this. It would be having a 24-hour access, weather-protected brochure display where it's just stocked and that's, automated. You don't have to do anything else, and your CVB staff would be in offices and they would work 9 to 5 and they would make sales calls and then they'd go home and there would never be that interface. So that we have a visitor center and that we have a visitor center that has such carefully curated displays from the community, and there's such an investment from the community in the success of it. And on top of that, that we're open 7 days a week, it really is something that sets us apart. And we'll talk about that more in the marketing plan. But it's those little subtle nuances that we take for granted because it's always been that way. But when you go other places, you don't find that.
We have compliments from people that are in our industry that come here and are handled well at our visitor center. It has
We need to invest in our visitors and come up with what kind of, I guess, incentives we offer our visitors, what kind of perks we offer our visitors, and have it. That's a great selling point too, that whether it's discounts or whether it's free entry into some of these things or such, that needs to, I think, be developed, and certainly planting that seed now will bear much fruit in the years to come. If we don't do that now, we'll have nothing to reap.
So how much do y'all want to bump that up to?
Well, actually spending the 1,000 would be a start.
Well, we've already,
Thousands.
Mike is already working on one appreciation luncheon.
Okay.
He's already got that spent.
Okay, he's already got that spent.
He's
And if we want to do volunteer recruitment
Yeah.
twice a year, if we
Yes.
want to do some kind of compensation, in-kind benefit kind of package.
I mean, does anyone have input, do you agree, or does, this is, I think it's a wise investment, certainly, in people power. Again, the word of mouth, having a local not a local who's spending their time here, talk to a visitor and say, yeah, I live here, I'm here volunteering. The impact of that is immeasurable. So I think it's a wise investment.
I think we could bump it up to 2,000. I would love to see us develop some little lapel pins for, not their name tags that they wear when they're here working, but some sort of little lapel pin that they would be proud to wear out in the community when they're visiting with other people who are potential volunteers, that, says, like if it's, I don't know if it's NAC CVB or Go NAC.
Or Visit
But
NAC.
volunteer, or visit NAC, volunteer, kind of like, this is probably way dating myself, but back when you used to have perfect attendance at Sunday school, you got your little Sunday school pin, and just, something they would be proud to wear out in the community.
I agree.
Or visit bank ambassador.
Yeah, ambassador's a great word.
And that's their appreciation one, we need to let them know what the new incentives are. So
Sure,
they'll-
absolutely.
So they'll be proud to re-up again and go, wow, I'll get some goods. I know at the Art Alliance, when I was just in Lufkin, those volunteers got free seats for each performance. So they worked it, and all they did was fill in wherever they could find good seats.
Lamplight does that.
I volunteered for that, I got free shows.
Well, and like Lamplight, since the CVB sells tickets for them, maybe, you know,
Percentage of those
tickets to give to volunteers, I think that would be really nice.
Okay, so we'll start with 2,000 in that category, and we'll develop,
And that would be another good thing to get community buy-in on. We could get somebody to sponsor, add some sponsorships.
Okay, do y'all want to take a break from this?
yeah,
computer?
let's take a quick 10-minute break, and then, it's almost 11. So however long it takes you to do that, so we can to move on.
5 minutes to one computer, and then 5 minutes to type it in.
I sold like 140 shirts to one man.
I asked Mike, I said, are you sure about these tape sales, you know, because we're all over the board with that tape, it's crazy to get anything out.
Okay, so that pulls our reserves, pull from reserves is 87.5.
Is that minus the 43? Is that an
That
addition?
isn't, 43 is not entering into it yet. Yeah, if we take the 43 off of that, it's a little less, but what we've got to do is figure out how to present this. I guess really.
And I, personally, I'm fine with that, because we could be reimbursed through the 43,000, and we do need to spend the, you know, we make a point that, and we haven't spent all of the reserves that we thought we were this year. We made a lot of allowances for things so that we wouldn't have to go back and ask for them later.
Right, for like the fire alarms.
Yep, and, you know, I mean, it's, you know, some of your stuff, you know, you said, oh, well, I'll probably find that money elsewhere, but, you know, we don't want you to have to, so.
Well, the difference in one of the big thing is that basically 25 grand for the website that we didn't pay last year, because it was included in when we paid that big bundle up front.
And we have to pay that.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, we're
There's no
away
way
out
out.
of contract.
Well, to somebody.
Okay, yeah.
The
Yes.
20, yeah.
You know, it's just, one thing about the budget's one thing, right, and the next thing, just to be able to defend it. So, I mean, these are actuals in many cases, and necessities in the others, I feel. In order for us to be productive, you have to give people the right, as you said, tools and to be as productive and efficient as possible with a staff this size. There's to be effective, they have to be able to function with the right technology. It's very limited staff. So we have to upgrade technology. Definitely need to, the safety and security of the fire pit. Phones had to be done Wi-Fi, just had to be. It's an expected, technology is expected, even with visitors and guests to our visitor center. So, you know, I don't see there's not wish list stuff in this number, right? I mean, it's
Function.
Not
This is
a press
operational
penny
functional
machine
stuff.
one.
And some it's one-time cost stuff, or, you know, it's not stuff that's gonna be recurring. Like, we're not gonna have to redo the fire system and all that.
Right.
Now, is your press penny thing in here?
How much is that price?
It's in there under servicing and events. It's-
It is
Hey, look,
$7,000,
we need to be backing
but it
off,
comes
'cause
with
that's-
4 different plates, and so there is an opportunity for us to
Chopping away at
sell.
15 grand.
How many
rights to
visitors do we
play.
get in the building
Sure.
each year?
Let's take it
Estimate.
step by
Oh,
step.
gosh,
That's about 900 a month.
We had to move it.
Yeah.
But we
50 cents.
moved it, but I still had that
50
feeling
cents per
on that.
guest. That's
there's no electricity because it's hand crank.
14,000 people. I'll just say this, I don't, every time I go to see a penny thing, I get one.
Me
I'm
too.
not a kid.
Every time. I
Well,
get
there's
two. I
not
get one for
any,
me and
there's
one
not
for
any
you.
in the entire county. We're gonna get
There's
local.
one at the Lufkin Zoo. That's the
Okay,
closest
but
one. I
this
don't even think it's
county-
operational.
I was
And
down
I use it
in
every
Galveston
time I
at the
go.
Alyssa, the tall ship, the sail ship,
Yeah.
hitting machine. And it fell out, as it was coming down the chute, it fell out into the thing, I couldn't get it. And I go up to, meet the lady, I can't get it. She goes, it's okay, I'll get you. You know, like I was 5, but
Oh, I thought it was like last year.
They have one in the
No,
candy
it
store
wasn't.
now.
It was 2 months ago. But,
It's Christmas, shut up.
right,
Obviously made an impression on you.
I was so upset, it was coming down the chute, and I was like, hey, oh, and it was in the machine, and I couldn't get it, but she gave me one. Okay, so,
We're gonna have locals come do this.
right,
We'll have
we just
locals.
need 14,000 visitors too.
I'll get all four, because they would get it.
Oh, I think people would do it for scavenger
I was thinking
hunts
that,
and,
yeah.
I think it'll be a thing to do, but there's nothing worse to me because I've been that kid on more than one occasion where, your parents are like, no, you can't have that, it's too expensive, but, 50 cents and your own penny, and you don't have to do anything, like, they just go and they do it, but,
And then it's a marketing piece.
and then there's collateral stuff, so there's little gummy bracelets that
You
the
attach
press
it.
penny sits in, and then pendants, and there's passports, and there's things.
That's what I was gonna ask, is to make a hole in it or something for a necklace, if it's got a little thing to pop it in.
But we could sell the different plates, so we could have oldest town in Texas, or 9 Flags, or whatever, but
And Mike needs to keep rolls of real shiny new pennies to give people.
it's good thinking right there, Ms. Martha. Anyway, these are the things I do.
Because a good penny is.
That's right.
A shiny penny is more valuable.
Well,
Okay, the question is, how do we present this to council? I won't highlight it in yellow, but we can say transfer from reserves, and when the presentation, John or Sherry, whoever does it, will say, this is primarily to renew the Simple View website and fire alarms and computer upgrades.
Cost of doing business.
If you say those 3 things, this is not something that we can regularly budget for. These things are big items. And I think if you just say transfer and reserves, 87,000, and say those 3 things.
What's our percent?
Well, if we take that out, our reserves are still at 22%.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. And I'm-
I just did
Yeah.
some quick math.
Because I think if we find out that percentage of what can we sit at, what can we keep in reserves and be okay by the terms of the city and stay above that, you can use the rest of it.
There, you said their threshold's about 20?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to. find
You'd be
out
safe at
exactly.
22.
22 ought to be.
Then
I
we
mean,
can-
I'm using what we would have remaining in reserves and dividing it by the proposed budget, which is higher than what it was last year,
Right,
so,
right,
Yeah.
so we're still at
so it's still,
Just a quick, if you were to add that 7 in there,
what would it be?
I mean,
And does that include what you're gonna take out of the reserves going into the final month of this year?
No, it isn't.
Doesn't account for that.
Doesn't account for that, because we don't really know what that is.
Do you think it'll drop us below 20%?
I'm not sure we're gonna have to, it kind of
Okay.
depends. I was thinking that first Simple View thing, what you told me was due in September would be this fiscal year, but if it's not due till December, I'm
That's
not
what
gonna.
they're saying in their latest email, now in this printed contract, it says.
Well, you know what, even if they send us invoice in September, if I wait till October 1st to pay it,
Yeah.
it'll come out of next fiscal year. I've put things in the drawer for it. I mean,
And this is,
I got a couple in the drawer right now.
this number is based on
Usually it's
anticipating
checks.
a flat year-over-year, right, in taxes. This is just anticipating status quo, nothing, knowing our income not changing, not going up, right? So, but there is potential there's always potential for both, but with the reporting not coming in as it says, and there's the hotels, the way that that's fallen, we haven't collected that quite yet, but the Airbnb, that kind of tax on the residents, potential income that we could have on here as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the projections, I would say from the state, from the country, all that, from a lodging standpoint, the projections are that it's certainly an increase. Oil and gas is certainly projected to be an increase. So I think that,
that can be said at the same time.
yes, that's the outlook. We're not counting on it. We're being responsible there, but that is still the projection.
Okay, the question is, do we, right now, we present it as the 87,000 coming out of reserves to fund primarily those three items. Do we even address the 43,000 contingency? Do we address CIP at all? Do we talk about those two things? Do we just, for this year, leave it? Because that 43 would actually reduce, you know, you can say that we expect this to be higher. We're not gonna count on it in this budget, but we expect it to be higher, and that will reduce the 87,000, and that's all you say?
Well, I think
at
they
this
would
point?
appreciate a forecast. I mean,
Yes.
that's an educated guess, a forecast. Now, our budget's not based on that forecast, it's based
Right.
on actual
Where we are right now.
data.
And borrowing from reserves.
Correct. And so I think they certainly would appreciate that our outlook, I mean, that's part of the presentation, I think, so I
Okay.
would say yes.
And just kind of wait on the CIP for next fiscal year, because, I mean, it doesn't make sense, like she said, to transfer from one reserve to the other reserve to do it. Basically, if the air conditioners go out or the hole in the roof has to be replaced, we're gonna have to go to reserves to get it anyway.
And that's what our reserves are for.
That's what they're charging for at this point. The problem is, normally a CIP is funded, like I know the city does it, there's a certain amount every month that is put into that fund. And so it's continually building up, and you only go take chunks out when you have to repair an air conditioner or something like that. We don't have anything, we do not have a program right now to replenish reserves. So
Oh, yeah.
we're not ever putting anything into it. We would only be pulling out of it. So
To me, we don't need to get to that point
Until
until
the
we
reserves get
get
lower.
to lower than 22%. And so at this point, I wouldn't even use the phrase borrowing from reserves,
No.
because borrowing
I'm calling it
implies you're gonna-
transfer.
it implies you're gonna pay it back. And we don't, because we're over 22%, we don't technically need to pay back now. So when we get to the point where we're at 22%, then we need to start that once a month adding to reserves to get back to that. I would think.
And, I mean, we're anticipating that our income at some point is gonna match our budget or allow us to fund that, you know, fund our reserves or CIP. But John, do you feel, you wanted to address that?
Well, it's because the way it's set now is that we'd have to go before the board and vote on pulling the money out of reserves for XYZ, whereas this way, we're anticipating that cost, and it's already there, and you can just go with it. Perhaps it's semantics, but, you know,
No, I get you. I get what you're saying. We want to look prepared, not like, oh no, we're having to pull out, drain our reserves because we're not prepared.
Well, at this point, if it's one of those three things that we've already talked about, Sherry and I will just pay the bill. Because y'all have already approved it as a
Right.
transfer from reserves, and city council's already approved it. Now, if it's a fourth item, unanticipated air conditioning system or whatever, then we probably would bring it to you and say, this is coming out of that $87,000, and we may not be able to do something else or whatever. If it's anticipated to be more than that. And perhaps some of that 43,000 comes in and it kind of mitigates all of that.
you want to address CIP with council on this budget? I mean, the cost is going to be incurred at some point in the future. That's an absolute. It just depends on where. And perhaps we say, we're keeping this amount of reserves in the budget in anticipation of CIP. Maybe that's how.
I like that wording.
Yeah.
do
I would
too.
like to err on the side of bringing it forward, because I think it just shows that we are not just haphazardly in here throwing money.
Thoughtful.
Yeah, but we're trying to be good stewards of the money, and we're trying to be forward-thinking. And then I think the other part is the onus back on us to, bring in Tinker and have him give us a fair appraisal of what's happening with our air system, and so that we can, we can use our board meetings spread out instead of having one huge reactionary meeting, but we can say, okay, this is something that we see coming down the line. let's bring in somebody that works with it and, you know.
I like that.
And the simpler you make this budget, in my experience with city council, the less questions you get. I wouldn't elaborate any more than you have to.
I don't think there's anything on here, we're not, you know, there's no smoke and mirrors. I
No.
think it's very transparent, everything has a reason, everything has a justification. I feel confident going forward and speaking with confidence.
The precedent in the past, I mean, not precedent, in the past, the budget has shown this is what last year's was and this is what this year's is. We had some, you noticed there were holes in there that we moved things around. Is that something we need to do for city council, do you think? I don't know.
I think the interdepartmental changes, I don't think matter. I think highlighting those areas that we're incurring large costs is why the budget is fluctuating.
Okay.
And then going with the focus is proactive sales and marketing and the tools to do that, the technology to do that efficiently and effectively. I think that is fine. Line by line I do not believe what they.
So you want me to summarize these things more? Okay.
I would say so. I would give them a clean look at
Okay.
that budget. And then if they want us to drill down into an area, certainly happy to do that.
But the comparison to it seems like maybe they asked that. That's why, I don't know if that's why it was done in the past. Did they ask, well, is this an increase over last year? Or is this
But so in that, I would be prepared to say, to tie those two together. Maybe if you, I don't know if we color code it to where it was moved from here to here, but you highlight those two and see that they mash. Or if there is a large fluctuation in a category such as the website, that's highlighted out that this is why, the technology, the computer, that is why. And then but the overview is that this budget is higher by this amount for these three reasons. And then go from there.
And I would think probably, if they've given it any thought, I would imagine their expectation is for there to be some changes, just with a new executive director and a new, I think, I don't think it'll shock them that
There's
categories have been
shifted.
shifted.
Reorganization.
Yeah.
Is there any more questions or input on the budget?
It's about a 3%. That's not, over last year, that's not huge.
Okay. All right. Do we need to vote on approving this? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the proposed budget for 2019 to go to council.
The income is 605, 810. The total income, total budget, total expense is 605,810. Is what you're looking at.
To approve the proposed budget of 600,005.
600,005, 810.
$810
$605,810.
to go before the council. Have a motion?
Second that motion?
We need somebody to make it.
Oh, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll
Have a
second.
Second.
All in favor of approving the proposed budget to go before council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. Very well. Now, we get to the fun part.
Yeah. Okay, so I've never been satisfied with the marketing plan that I came into because it arbitrarily set forth some metrics that I don't feel aligned properly at all with the work that's being done here, because a lot of what Joanna is doing in sales all of us, it's building relationships, and we might not see a return, an immediate return. Sometimes it's not, we won't see something in, for 2 more years. I mean, it's hard to find metrics. There are metrics and analytics out there for us. So in coming up with how I wanted to approach a marketing plan, and this is just the outline, this isn't what we would present. It'll be all prettiful with infographics and charts and a lot more information. So basically I wanted to go over this with you guys, get your input where you see, if you see things that you're like, that's gilding the lily, then we can certainly cut that out. But I feel like if we proceed with this, it helps me as an executive director sort of set the tone and make sure that we're all reading from the same script, we're all speaking the same language, and we all understand the context of our situation. So, starting off, it would be an introduction that would include an executive summary, and that would come from me. That would just give a general overview, and then it would move into, the executive summary would be my observations coming in and my forecast looking forward. And then the NAC CVB overview, which would be our mission statement, our organizational brand promise, our organizational vision, and our business unit structure, so those properties that we own. And that would be where we address where we use Nacogdoches Convention and Visitors Bureau, where we're going to use Visit NAC, and why that's important. Just sort of an explanation of that. A state of the destination report, so where we are right now, what are the trends in the travel and tourism industry, what's the climate, what technology is out there, what are customer expectations of destinations, and this is speaking generally, and then diving down into the strengths of our destination and what support and engagement we have from our community. So that would be the first item, where if y'all wanted to have some specific input into what you consider strengths of Nacogdoches as a destination and examples of our support, community support and engagement.
Certainly, I think you touched on in the budget, our strengths as a equal Nacogdoches. Like our visitors and the willingness, the manpower that we have here. When somebody comes into our community, I think that we present ourselves very well as a community. The fact that we're a historical destination location for many people who visit certainly is one of our greatest strengths. And then also this educational center, especially with the addition of the STEM center. I think that's going to enhance our profile as well academically. SFA is the biggest motivator, I think, as far as economics, certainly. But that's another one of our strengths, is that coming online is exposes a lot more students and such.
People are beautiful to look at.
I might be a little confused on what we're doing now, but would this be kind of the 5 pillars or whatever they identified as our focus?
Stephanie and I have already identified the 5 pillars based on the analytics of what people are coming to us.
So you're just asking personally what we think our strengths are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of this will do is sort of, a brand is much more than a logo. A brand is the feelings that thoughts of that destination evoke, and I think it's important for us to understand the assets that we have. And we don't have to come to an agreement you know, Wanda might think, you know, we're a beautiful destination, and Shirley might think, well, yes, but, you know, does that take precedence over X, Y, or Z? But we can be, this is one of those things where everybody's invited to the party.
One thing I noticed, was it Texas Monthly that had the revival of the small town?
Mhm.
Whatever, I mean, we will always be considered the welcoming small town community, I mean, in the best way possible. We don't have big city traffic and congestion and any businesses. We have mom and pops, we have the people that live here all their lives and are dang proud of it. So we're gonna have that feel.
Mom and pop is good, but I think what this town has is so many entrepreneurs. You know, it's the fact that, yeah, you're getting the unique, but you got a lot of business people here. Yes, I keep going back to the university, but that business in that STEM, I mean, they had a 9% increase, didn't they, last year in enrollment, business school?
I think so. And I base that beautiful, I take it for granted because I'm from here, so I actually take it for granted. That's what I keep hearing our visitors tell me.
Mhm.
I mean, got dinner, and they keep saying, it's such a beautiful area, and I'm thinking,
I don't know if this is really more of a marketing thing, but yes, I say all the time in my sales, we're the best kept secret.
Mhm.
I mean, we are the region of Texas that is still
yes.
the best unknown. I mean, it used to be, like, that's the way Fredericksburg was. But those small town things that you're talking about in that magazine, you see how small they were, for like less than 10,000 people.
But we have that feel.
Yeah.
We definitely.
Even if
Well,
our population is 3 times more or whatever,
and
we still
what,
keep that environment. I don't know how to express it.
The National Geographic writer, he said, you've got a big city amenities, but still the comfort of that small town.
Yes, and I think a lot of that has to do with business stuff too, business owners.
Well, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that take their passion. I mean, I'm thinking of the recycling of glass and things
Mhm.
and make products and supply services that are just based solely on their passion. And that's what it does make it to me.
I think one of our strengths is we're easy to get to, we are easily accessible.
Yeah.
It's gonna be nice.
So we're in striking distance of Dallas and Houston.
We are.
Three.
And Shreveport. You know,
Yes.
when I made the circle.
Shreveport, yes. Had some folks driving through to Houston who came through from Shreveport and purposely came
Yeah.
through. Purposely came through here.
They're getting a lot of Beaumont area people.
Mm-hmm. We've noticed that too,
Yeah.
and they'll just come up for the day.
So, that's the thing, I want to get out of Beaumont. Okay.
It's understood.
So moving from that, and if y'all think of something else down the line, I'm gonna be putting together the whole collective thing and I'll present it to you guys. You can email me, things, I believe that would be allowable, the
Mhm.
strength,
Mhm.
yeah. And then moving into brand architecture, which would be brand positioning, and that's the act of designing the company's offering an image to occupy a distinctive place in the mind of our target markets. In other words, brand positioning describes how a brand is different from its competitors. So what makes us different from Lufkin? What makes us different from Fredericksburg? And we've touched on some of that. And I think where we win, hands down every time, is how people leave here feeling. That's my biggest takeaway from reading reviews and hearing from people that have been here before. It's their experience with Mike Bay or with our weekend volunteers, or I think that's where we win. We don't have a Six Flags, we don't have a, Hawaiian Falls. We've got what we've got, and we've got some great things. But it's the people that always make a difference. So
Is that an emotional experience? Is that the
Yeah,
word?
that's-
Emotional experience?
I'd like to include a positioning statement, and that is really just 3 words that summarize Nacogdoches. So that would be another place for some input, just 3. If you're taking
make suggestions now. One of the words that the Writers League of Texas, when I was taking their video testimonies, every one of them said hospitality. That one, and charm, but hospitality for sure, and I think that describes what you're.
You know, the three words reminds me of Mesquite.
Restore.
I've talked about this with other people and how they have branded their entire city is under one brand. And whatever tree that falls under, and then it goes, you know, it goes to whatever the CVB, the city utilities or the chamber, it falls under. But theirs is real Texas, and then whatever it's for, music or real Texas food, or, you know, they, right, you know.
How people feel about Davy Crockett and all of that, they just love that about Nacogdoches, which you just don't.
That authentic Texas.
That visit here, you know, all, go ahead.
Authentic hospitality.
Yes.
It is, there, when I talk with you know, my employees and such, I want them to be authentic, I want them to be genuine.
Mhm.
I think genuine's not
You know,
used.
and so that's, just be yourself, but be the best you can be. We're Nacogdoches, we're the best small town you can be. We have the best of you know, we have a great university with the small town feel still, right? I mean, it's,
The look and appeal of a private university, the access of the state. A state school. One of the reasons that I felt it important to include brand architecture in this is because moving forward, my feelings from what I've been told is that Nacogdoches will be moving more towards a Mesquite kind of approach, an overarching branding of Nacogdoches. And I feel like if we get out in front of it, then it lets us be in front of it and driving the bus. And so instead of being told, here's what your brand is going to be, adopt, then maybe we can shape it so that it is inclusive to everybody, but kind of suits our purposes. Because Mr. Jeffers has been very clear in public, not just in private talks, that he really sees the value of travel and tourism to this community, to the economic impact. He and mayor and council all recognize that we are the primary economic driver for right now. So while we have that momentum, I feel like we need to take ownership of, we need to lick everything. This is our. Mine. Dibs. Okay. And then initiative targets, and this is who we're going after. So the modern family, however that looks, our hometown host, so specifically targeting our locals who are inviting friends and family in to stay with them. How do we service them as a group? They're not staying in our hotels, but they're still coming in and having a visitor experience. The perfect planners, that would be our meeting planners, meeting and events. All in the family refers to multi-generational travelers. More and more, that's the trend of grandparents traveling, traveling 3 and 4 generations in a group. So how do you address the needs of all of that? I feel like that's a great target for us because of our varied offerings. The great outdoors speaks for itself, and then past is present speaks towards history. And making sure that we keep our history alive and vibrant and relative. And then breaking down into the Visit NAC business plan, focus on goals and budgets for each within, but the leisure traveler, meeting and events, sports, and local community. And the wedding market would be included in that, wedding and events.
Okay, initiative targets. And then go to the different business market segmentations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the leisure and the business, so we kind of split it into the leisure side, or I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the focus on how to go again, go and get each market segmentation of the other meeting planners, events, sports, that kind of thing.
Right.
Leisure travel, I mean, are we even addressing day trippers, or are we just gonna?
I think we have to address everybody, honestly.
Well, in turning the day trippers into overnight
Yeah.
stays, Blueberry Festival is, I think, a good example of this, of how we're trying to stretch a one-day festival, which or what was a one-day festival, into a weekend, and expand it. I think that's working. I think it's going in the right direction, certainly.
And there's another one,
The hub and spoke,
the Hub and Spoke.
and what's another?
And, you know, I had a conversation with Lufkin, so we're gonna be doing a whole lot more with them.
That's kind of hub and spoke, though, isn't it?
It is, and along with our El Camino, got the list from the purgatory yesterday, it's over 400 people.
I think turning these
So that would
parents,
fall into that
Yeah.
area? Okay.
I think the parents coming to SFA and dropping off Johnny and Susie, and turning that into where they stay, actually.
Yeah.
And I've seen that trend increasing as well, instead of just coming up from Houston, unhitching the U-Haul.
And
See,
having,
that they're actually staying more, that's starting to increase. I think that's a market, certainly, that's a, the alumni, getting them to come back to Nacogdoches, as you're already addressing.
we are hosting the social too for the.
When a day tripper is, they're halfway here. They're here, they're halfway to staying overnight. We already have them. The parents are coming to visit their kids. They're already en route. Let's a little bit more to get them to stay over,
Well, and not just stay over, because, most of them are in orientation, but we are now doing the social thing. It was our first year, but we had a blast.
They loved it.
Yeah, they had a great time.
Parents I had come in contact with loved it.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Right. And what we shared with them is about when they come back on Parents' Day and doing some things that we call off of North Street. Because sometimes you're drop off, leave, but getting them to
You gotta
stay.
go longer before you go.
But yeah,
Can't expect
exactly,
you to
I
go
agree.
longer.
So they can get to fall in love with the town, not
Right.
just as a place for your spending money.
And get them to where, if they're staying over for orientation, stay over that Friday. If
Yeah.
you're here Thursday already, stay over that Friday and do this. And that those sort of things are getting traction. And you've got to build it, it builds. It's
And
not-
the other huge one is when people walk in the store. I mean, when Mike's up there, or even our interns or any of us, it's the best experience. I'm sure that you, the volunteer, it's so much fun when people are coming in. We have the afternoon and then you start talking about what all we have and they're like, wow, we gotta come back. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I've heard plenty, and it's gender non-specific, plenty, single person in the couple convince the other to stay. I've seen wives convince their husbands to stay, and I've seen just the opposite when they hear, oh, well, the historic site is closing at 4, I'd really like to see that, and then the wife is like, I want to get back. And
Well, the lady that came in, that came, first time I ever heard from Dallas, this was last week. Her name was Sherry, Sherry. And this Sherry said, sit down to you, because she was looking for Kinko's or something, like, just use our computer.
Yeah.
Well, then I came down, and I looked at her like I recognized her, we started talking. So they're gonna be staying there, putting an offer in on a house, she said, I'm buying a home. And now they're staying a month out in Somerville for the dinner, so. That just happened, cool things happen.
yeah, they were in from Forney, relocating from Forney. So the second item is moving into our different divisions. So the Visit NAC audience plans, which would be what sales would be. For the leisure traveler, defining those target markets, looking at where we are pulling from in the state, region, nation, and international from the past, and then forecasting towards the future so that we can see where we already are pulling from, and then looking to see if we want to diversify that or how we can reinforce that and forecast to the future. And then defining our objectives and initiatives and strategies. And I think that one line, the objectives, initiatives, and strategies is gonna be where we can hopefully stray away, use the metrics that we have where they are, but not say every quarter Mike needs 2 new things in the gift shop. I mean, there's some really arbitrary ones in the marketing plan that we're replacing, where I feel like we need to focus more on monitoring, and our overarching goal needs to be, let's make sure that the needle is moving in the right direction. Let's not put a quantitative number, because that can become really demotivating if Joanna can't secure an increase of 10% in overnight room sales or group sales. Then it becomes, it's unnecessary pressure that detracts from being productive. But that doesn't mean that we don't, with our CRM, that we don't have some measurable analytics that we can say, well, here's where we've reached out, this is what we've done, we're doing our part. But sometimes you have to lay that, you have to sow the seeds, and you just have to nurture. And
So more so focusing on the action items to get to the overall goal, which is to move the needle.
yes,
So accomplishing the mini goals, if you will, the actionable items, then that, by doing those things, we will move the needle instead of focusing on it.
yeah, our objective is to increase overnight sales,
Yeah.
group sales. Here's the initiatives that we're using to do that, and these are the strategies within that. We're, reaching out to groups that have visited similar destinations and trying to convince them, or we're going for corporate so that we can focus more on being a retreat for them, or, that kind of thing. And then, so that kind of goes through the leisure traveler, introducing the concept of, we'll touch upon our Nacogdoches lodging outlook and just our performance of our properties. And always giving the frame of reference of what's happening in the state and what's happening in the nation, because I think that's important. I don't think that's something that our partners and stakeholders focus on. You're focused on just what's happening here, but I think it's important to know everybody in the state is suffering in these areas, or this is this is a compounded issue because of oil and gas recovery, or whatever. But providing as much information as we can. Future maps. That's where you look at everything that you are facing, the different issues, and you exploit your strengths, you mitigate your weaknesses, you monitor opportunities, and prepare for contingencies or threats. And that's similar to what we did in the budget just now with, providing the optics that we're aware that these things are coming. It's a when, not if. That kind of thing. But while we can, we want to capitalize on the antique car crowds that we naturally draw, or the frisbee golf. Doing the same things for meeting and event planners, just providing different metrics where we can, like the past room nights by market, group room nights, and room demands. Again, a future map, and then showing the trade shows, events, and fan tours. Sports, we're still dipping our toes into that. We're waiting on the infrastructure, but while we are waiting, I think it's important that they show that that's on our radar, and we're doing the preparatory work for that while we wait for the infrastructure to support and convert. And on local community, defining our micro audiences, so our historic preservationists, our, the different groups that we have, the young leaders, our JCs. How can we serve those groups, our small business owners, and working with our community partners, again, with the objectives, initiatives, and strategies, and future map, and then that leads us into marketing.
And local community would also include the SFA efforts.
Those too, yeah. Be sure and highlight that. Advertising is a lot of research and planning, looking at our strategic partnerships, where we can use them, print and digital presence. And something that's been in the talks, and just Joanna put the bug in my ear, it's this destination storytelling, and I think it goes part and parcel with the 2 campaigns that Hancock has delivered to us, that we've got an act for that, and it's in our nature. And back to that, our brand positioning. we really are the story keepers and the storytellers at this destination. And so I think if we keep that as our wheelhouse and going back to that destination storytelling, telling the story of Nacogdoches and what we have to offer, like who we are, where we've been, where we're going, and keep that as a primary focus, I think we're going to get a really directed marketing approach that is going to hit consumers on a very visceral level and incite them to come and to take action. So I've tried to integrate that into all the different components. Content development, brand identity and management, really taking seriously what is our tone, what is our message, what is our voice, so that it is consistent and it's already authentic, it's already genuine, but we just need to make sure that it is reinforced at every stage. So that's, later down in the outline, we'll talk about visitor services, and that's where that visitor ambassador volunteer training will come in. But again, getting ahead of that and controlling the narrative instead of responding to things. But brand identity and management is something that we haven't really focused a lot of attention on in the past. Looking at our collateral, which I know Stephanie worked hard on last year, but continuing that to make sure that it's updated and in line. Branching out more in video and social media and e-communications to see how we can de-sterilize some of that and make it a more real connection, make it usable, make it genuine. But certainly video, Stephanie and I have talked about coming up with a video room, using one of our rooms down here to set up a mini studio of sorts, so that on Friday, instead of in addition to publishing a hot list of things to do, then maybe it's, Mike sits down in front of the camera with very flattering light. I'm the test dummy on the lighting. But you get Mike's picks. And so we're putting faces to visit NAC, and here's Joanna's considerations. Here's what, and it opens up to our partners coming in to talk about, maybe we can meet the performer for jazz on the patio at the Fredonia. So again, it's giving you that backstory. It's giving you that behind the scenes access. So for a couple of $100 investment in the use of a room that's sitting empty, we can really utilize technology and just the ease of pushing video content out there and achieve some great things, I think.
And that would go on social media or here in the
Yeah.
visitor center. Yeah, I think those things are very impactful.
Does a lot of videos really good.
Well, and we can actually go on location with Facebook Live now, but one of our thinking with the Texas Writers coming through is if we collect these snippets, kind of like a real world confessional where you get sort of the behind the scenes, and all of a sudden, if you get enough of those, if you get 10 of those and you ask them all the same question, what was your first impression of Nacogdoches, then you have, you can compile them all together and you've got a little 30-second sizzle reel on why you should bring your meeting to Nacogdoches. So we're trying to work smart.
Charlie Doches anywhere?
He is not on here, but certainly he will be integrated at everywhere that he can be.
It could be Charlie's workout.
I follow this dog on Facebook. I follow a couple of dogs, but one's a little Dachshund Crusoe.
Oh, yeah, and he kayaks. And,
Yes.
Yeah, he is
Yeah.
very active.
Yeah. So I can see like Charlie Doches at Milford's getting a haircut. That
Well,
kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know why, but I follow because I like it.
They are
Just,
so popular, yeah.
And he was a pirate, and whatever. But it's just that's a connection again that you can make with people on a different level than straight in your face kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's what he's being trained for now, is to make sure that he can do that in a safe way. He's still just 6 months old, but no, he'll be.
He's in training. He's a young Joe.
Yeah.
He's in training.
It's so funny.
Group sales, we've got Joanna. I'm also going to include in the marketing plan the budget, because that wasn't really included in the last marketing plan. They were still kind of two separate entities, and I think it's important that they see, especially when we're looking at a 3% increase, that they see this is what we're wanting to do. And so it provides some clarity and some further justification of, we're not just buying Kit Kats, we're actually putting this money to use. I would love a Kit Kat. Don't get me wrong. It's delicious. Visitor and guest services and sundry sales, again with the brand identity. My intent is to have a line of merchandise that features that we've got a knack for, and so we can start pushing out caps and mugs and t-shirts. And I just designed a Euro Oval sticker for us to sell. It should be in Thursday. It says 1779, Nacogdoches, oldest town in Texas. But just trying to get our message out where we can.
Do you only sell the merchandise here, and can you sell the merchandise?
We can sell merchandise online. We just have to look at our cost. We had tremendous interest in the mugs, specifically when we posted those on Facebook for people that wanted to mail order those. And we've got the boxes and the logo packing tape and everything. We just need to work on the pricing because they're just heavy. It's a big mug and it's heavy. And like t-shirts, we could make a lot of money if we ever wanted to open up and do online sales. But it's one of those, do we have the staff for
I
it?
was thinking more of destinations like a winery, we wanted to sell their stuff out there. I understand. I mean, we're expanding, so.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing, probably need to talk to the board as a whole and get a plan on that, but I don't think we have a.
Right now, it's only here, right?
Yeah, right,
Okay.
right now, our stuff is just here. Inventory management, and again, instead of stressing adding 2 new items every quarter, I'd rather just trust Mike's judgment or trust that position to monitor and say, these Afghans aren't selling, let's lay off those for a minute and let's get a Yeti, let's get,
Put them in I get that, or auction items as well.
And then volunteer supervisor, recruitment, training, scheduling, and then recognition. And then also the visitor experience management, and that speaks especially during Azalea Trail season where we've got groups coming in. They're day trippers, but we want to make sure they have the best time because those are the people that will come back and stay longer. And then the office building supply budget. And I think we're going to be really satisfied with separating that line item on the budget so that office supply doesn't include building supply. Because I think if we're ever going to move to a time where the city completely takes over maintenance of the building, they'll be able to see a true cost and not my Post-its with the toilet paper. I mean, things just needed to be shimmied out. And then the last section would be our governance, and that would be the board of directors, the executive team, any accolades and awards that we've accrued, and then an index of industry terms, because there's a lot that I assume people know just because I speak it all the time, but they don't. So it is a lot of stuff to cover in a marketing plan. I think once it's all together, I think it'll be impressive. I don't think it'll be overwhelming, but it certainly will show that a lot of thought and preparation has gone into it.
A couple of things that I know that the council has said in the past is they want that beginning and middle and end. They want to see, they want to know what our results are going to be, what our expectations or results for these actions. They want some sort of gauge or measurable thing, and that's part of the reason that we started to go that way with that other marketing plan. They don't want to see a lot of fluff in it. That can go back into another section in greater detail, but more of an outline sort of plan. And anyone correct me if I'm right, but that's just what I'm remembering. And then.
However, the presentation might have a lot to do with that too, the style.
Right.
But yes, everything you were saying,
Right.
I remember the same way.
But no, I'm just
Yeah.
with those couple of things in mind,
But,
You know, it would be helpful to go back and watch the previous presentation. I don't know if that would be helpful or
That
not.
would be John.
no,
No, the previous presentation.
yeah.
The previous group.
Right, that previous, if you watch the
That was
previous,
scary.
it was,
That was where they kept coming back with changes too, right?
yeah, that was.
I think you're right on that. I definitely think, I'm drawing a blank, but anyway, I think it's who's making the presentation.
Oh, the style?
Uh,
Well, here's
Ever
the
since
thing.
I've been here, it's been rough.
Yes.
If Sherry's gonna do this particular one, the marketing,
Yeah, I'll do it.
moving through it easily, which I think you do that with your phrases and your expression. And I think if we can keep them from getting us bogged down to specific questions at the moment. And is there a way we can keep it moving through and then we can address any specific
Well,
concerns at the end?
It's a presentation,
Yeah.
right? And so absolutely, I think that the way you're gonna present it will be much better than it has. Much.
And two, she's, come on, she's made such a great impact with
Sure.
council.
Yeah, I
Sure.
watch.
And so the trust has already been laid out.
Certainly.
And,
And I think we have a gift with the campaign from Hancock, because not only are we gonna use that in everything, we can use that in this presentation. This is what we have a knack for, and that's how we present it to city council.
Mhm.
And I think that way they could really receive the campaign well, and it's cute,
I think
Yeah.
before, the feeling what's been communicated to me is that the CVB lacked a direction and a focus. And for whatever reason, they feel like that is present now, and that there is momentum and a trajectory. So I think as long as we don't put fluff, and I don't intend on giving them any information that isn't germane to the point, and not get mired down into it, but I really, really want to move away from these, I want to give them metrics, but I want those to matter. Nothing irritates me more
Absolutely.
than just a graph for a graph's sake. I want it to mean something. I want to show them,
Absolutely.
this is why I feel this is important, otherwise I wouldn't show it to you.
And this is why, yes.
And this is why, I think if we can, and justify, I think it'll be good, and I think it'll be purposeful, and I think it'll be more meaningful for us, because I think it will keep us on point and on target, and will help us make decisions as they come on the fly. So as we get calls for ad buys and media buys from remnants, we can say, I'm sorry, that's not in line with our marketing plan, and just not even entertain it, because it's so easy to get distracted by the shiny objects. I think it will continue us on a forward trajectory in the path that we're supposed to be going, which is going to give us these deliverable results that the council wants.
Right, and I think why they asked for the measurables is because of the feeling of lack of direction. And they felt if they asked for specific measurable
It
things.
was confusing.
that-
They were confused.
Right.
So what they needed
Absolutely.
instead was, just give me the number of that.
That's right.
So, yeah.
But I
Something to
think-
share, so.
I like the way Sherry takes this industry that is complex and is innovative and changing every day, but you can communicate where we all understand it. And I think, yeah, but you've definitely done a great job of pinpointing this. I mean, we have the direction, I think, here, all the way
Clear
down.
overriding
Yeah.
theme in here that we
Well, the only other thing I would ask this group, before we're able to adjourn, is, what are some key performance indicators that you want communicated to council? Like,
We have to be always fulfilling our mission.
That's a
To
bit.
me, we have to show, that's what they want to hear, I feel like,
Right.
and that's the purpose.
We shifted away from some of the other things we were doing because it was felt they weren't putting the heads in beds. I think that being good stewards of the taxpayers' money and putting the money towards what it was intended to, which is the tourism heads and beds, and focus on that. And you can just take anything out of here and its purpose is all leaning in that direction. I don't think there's anything that they can really take and go, well, what do you mean by that? How could this possibly affect that? You know what I mean? I think that this is clear, that it's, everything is pointed, flowing in that same direction, the beds and beds, and that's the overall, that's our mission statement, right? So if that's where this is flowing towards, I think that it'd be fine, especially with 8%.
And one thing that Stephanie and I have already talked about, I really want to start growing our digital and social media, and that is focus on growing our base there. And Stephanie's been doing a knock out of the park, great job at curating some really engaging, our numbers are really great, but some really highly engaging Facebook posts. So kudos to her for that. I want to continue that, I want to grow it, and I think with the addition of video, I think we're in line for some good stuff. So that would be one thing that I would add to the KPIs.
And she created a human.
That's a whole person.
Yeah, she's the best thing I've ever done.
Who's that?
EJ.
Oh, EJ.
Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah. If I died tomorrow, at least I did that, so.
All right, and that's all I've got.
Ms. Lerman, you have?
I think we need a vending machine.
I think so too.
That's what, I mean, another performance indicator could be visitors, keep visitors into this building. And what better thing to do than give people a very inexpensive way? I feel like a lot of people who come into the visitor center don't have $10 to spend, or whatever it's supposed to be, $14 on a t-shirt. They've got a quarter or whatever to put in, and they've got 3 or 4 kids with them, then they probably have 4, each.
Well, it's not a vending machine that we have to be stocking. They bring their quarters, they bring their pennies.
And I think that SFA could pay some little premium, have a
One of the
plate
plates.
in there. And I don't know what other businesses might be interested in, sponsoring a plate. I don't know what that would look like. But I think it would be, it's just automatic that SFA would pay a certain amount to have one in there so that people wanted to have some sort of SFA piece. So I think we can make part of that happen, if we can do the other part.
Yeah.
Maybe that falls under.
But this is the restricted versus unrestricted, just looking at, and you end up with, in the restricted, you're in a negative position, because unrestricted, which we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Can we just go do it?
My
It's
penny-
just a,
My penny machine
it's
is
just a
marketing.
thought, you know? It just shows the breakdown of
Maybe
where
the
we're.
happiest executive director.
I mean, I think
My cold dead heart.
I won't be the first customer.
We got a Dr. Charlie in there somewhere in that building.
No, because we're not, well, shoot,
Yeah.
we're supposed to vote on, we are supposed to vote
Yeah,
on
for the marketing plan.
We do.
You have a quorum when it was called.
What is it, I don't know how many is a quorum.
I don't know,
It's
last
four.
night.
Yeah. But when John announced that we had a quorum to go into this meeting,
Yeah.
we're
But
ready to go.
last night, Roy Bolden left to go to the bathroom,
Uh-huh.
and they couldn't take votes until he got back, because they only had 3 last night.
Now, I was told that when you establish a quorum, if they leave, your quorum is still established.
On the, well, she didn't
Well,
want
we
to.
still have
still
a
follow
majority.
it.
If we're still good, if we
Yeah.
only have to have 4, then
Yeah.
we're good. Yeah, okay.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed 2019 marketing plan to go before council. Motion.
Can you make a motion to this?
Want the
propose
post.
for me?
Okay, second. All in favor of moving forward with the marketing plans, can say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
I have one more question. Did we actually decide on this insurance? Should we go ahead and let this policy renew for next year?
We did not decide on the insurance.
And I would look into
And
having
then we can
possibly
renew.
John Hanley come in and tell us dollar amounts.
Yeah, and then evaluate it at that time. So we'll,
We are not renewing.
We're not renewing. I'll let them know.
all right. Good.
Next meeting.
And that's $2,500. Half your bidding sheet. We're gonna get that yet.
All right, with that being done, next meeting day will be 8:30 a.m. Wednesday, September 19th, right here, Charles Pride Visitor Center. And with that, meeting is adjourned.
Thank y'all so much.
John, you're doing